Jaime stood amid the shattered remnants of the wedding feast, the air thick with screams and the harsh scraping of overturned chairs. He had never known a hall to grow so suffocating in such a short span of time. The moment Joffrey drew his last breath, the king's face locked in that terrible purple rictus. All illusions of celebration splintered. Servants dashed in all directions, some half-sobbing, some stumbling on the strewn rushes, while guests retched at the sight of the boy king's lifeless eyes. It was a chaos that matched the deafening roar in Jaime's mind. Even the golden tapestries now seemed tainted. Their regal shimmer turned dull beneath the pall cast by death. He felt Cersei's trembling hand close on his sleeve. She was shrieking, half incoherent, her eyes wild. "He's gone," she howled into the stunned silence. "Gone? And it's Tyrion who did this, I know it." She jabbed an accusing finger toward their dwarf brother, who stood in an equally stunned hush not far off, chalice still rolling at his feet. It felt to Jaime as if the floor might open beneath them. He could not rip his gaze from Joffrey's body. 1,000 thoughts flickered in his mind. He should have saved the boy. Should have done something, recognized the sign of poison, or forced him to spit it out. But it was too late, too cruel and too final. The weight of fatherly remorse descended on him. Though he had never publicly acknowledged the boy as his son, the child he had once bounced upon his knee, dead, so abruptly, so brutally, guilt welled in him, a strangling fist around his throat. In his daze, he almost failed to hear the growing uproar from the crowd. Tyrion was seized. Meryn Trant laid a hand on him, while others closed ranks. Sansa vanished into the swirl of panic, or perhaps she never was truly there for him to see. Lord Tywin, unflinching amidst it all, was shouting commands to the king's guard, demanding that order be restored. Guests cowered in the corners, their finery stained by wine. The sweet scent of roast boar had twisted into the stench of spilled wine and fear. Jaime felt the comforting weight of a sword at his hip. He had grown accustomed to fighting with his left hand, but that skill was still so new, so feeble compared to his old prowess. Yet no matter how awkwardly it might be done, he wanted to draw steel in that moment, to protect someone. But who, precisely? Joffrey was beyond help, and the rest were all either suspects or potential accusers. Cersei would not let go of him. Her nails dug into his tunic as she tried to bury her face in his chest. "He must pay," she spat. "Tyrion must pay. He murdered our son, Jaime. Promise me. Promise me." Jaime said nothing. His own grief and shock swirled, though he kept it buried behind a mask of stoic command. Already, the wide eyes of lords and ladies flicked his way, searching for some sign of what was to come next. They were watchers, predators, opportunists, and he was suddenly aware that with Joffrey dead, Tommen was next in line. Tommen, young, sweet Tommen, with no taste for cruelty like Joffrey had, but neither prepared for the cunning brutality of the Iron Throne. What would happen to the boy in this nest of vipers? He imagined Tywin moving to control Tommen as a puppet, the old lion pulling the strings. Yet there was another possibility, one that hung unspoken in the hush of the hall. Jaime was the eldest son of Tywin Lannister. Even if no one dared breathe it, some among them must be thinking, could Jaime, the Kingslayer, assume the throne himself? By all the gods, what an irony that would be. A man who had murdered a king for the realm's sake might now be crowned king. But that was madness, an impossibility. Wasn't it? Jaime clenched his jaw and glanced over to his father. Tywin did not look at him yet. The Lord of Casterly Rock was busy orchestrating the aftermath. "Knights, seize the hall's exits. No one leaves without my permission." His voice cut through the noise, forcing some semblance of order. "Where is Pycelle?" "Here. See to the king's body." Amid the swirl of men in armor, the old Grand Maester tottered forward, stammering a half-hearted prayer. His watery eyes flickered between Joffrey and the outraged Queen Mother Duck. But no prayer could restore a dead boy. Cersei sank to the floor, cradling Joffrey's pale face for a moment, before she forced herself upright, fury contorting her features. "Tyrion, where are you taking him?" "Into custody," Tywin replied firmly. "He will stand trial. Do you wish the entire kingdom to see us unmanned by this? We must project unity and strength. Get up, daughter. You are still the Queen Regent." In the corner, Tyrion's gaze locked briefly with Jaime's. An unspoken plea, or perhaps merely a silent condemnation. Jaime could barely hold that look. His brother appeared smaller than ever, sorrow etched around his eyes. But Jaime had no words of comfort, no immediate show of support. Cersei was still clinging to his arm, and in that moment he realized that whatever alliances he might claim in the future, in that hall, in front of these hundreds of eyes, he had to be seen supporting his sister, or he would lose her forever. As the day's tumult bled on, as guards removed Joffrey's body to the Silent Sisters, and the guests were ushered to their rooms under watch, Jaime felt the weight of the tower's stone halls pressing on him. He, too, was ushered away by a handful of guards at Tywin's insistence, as if the old man feared more blood might be spilled. Jaime obeyed, though every muscle in his body screamed to remain by Joffrey's side, or at least by Cersei's. The next hours passed like a fever dream, a swirl of interrogations. Flustered searching for Sansa Stark, shouts echoing from corridor to corridor. Servants told of a jester sneaking away with the girl. Others whispered that Littlefinger had a hand in it. None of it changed the bitter truth. The king was dead. It was deep into the night, by the flicker of torchlight, that Tywin summoned Jaime to a small council chamber. The large table was dwarfed by the gloom. Cersei was there, eyes rimmed red and face pale from weeping, though she stiffened at once when Jaime arrived, as if resenting the show of any vulnerability. Several members of the small council hovered at a distance, while the Kingsguard stood in a rigid line. Tywin stood at the table's head, his fingers steepled, voice measured. "Tommen is our next rightful king. We will, of course, arrange the coronation soon, but the boy must be protected and carefully guided. The realm cannot see another boy king on the throne without strong counsel at his side. We must hold firm. The Lannister name depends upon it." "Then or so. Himilor Timdami her." Jaime watched his father's face, searching for something deeper than that stoic assertion. Tommen's name might fill the official documents, but Jaime suspected Tywin's will would rule. Did that not doom Tommen to the same fate as Joffrey? A puppet, or perhaps an unwitting sacrifice to the ambitions of others? Cersei's voice cracked. "He is too young. He can scarcely sign his own name with a firm hand." "That is precisely why we must act," Tywin said. "There will be no question of regency, no question of the line of succession. He must be crowned soon." Then. Silence fell, a suffocating hush. Jaime felt a slight tremor in his left hand, the memory of the sword in it. He was no longer the reckless, golden knight who had pushed Bran Stark from a window without a second thought. He was changed, hardened, chastened. His father's words roused an inkling of rebellion within him. Tommen must remain safe. He did not deserve to be cast into the pit of political vipers. Another quiet thought surfaced in Jaime's mind. What if someone else took the burden? What if he, the scorned Kingslayer, sat the throne, shielding Tommen from that ruinous seat? It was the kind of thought that would have horrified him once, but now, as he stared at the anguish in Cersei's face, he found a small spark of possibility. It was, after all, not so unprecedented for men to place a grown warrior upon the throne. If a child king was seen as too weak for the immediate crisis, and the realm was indeed in crisis. Joffrey was dead under mysterious circumstances. War still smoldered in pockets of the kingdom, and Stannis might not be done. The Tyrells' loyalty might waver if they suspected Lannister weakness. No one spoke those thoughts aloud, but the tension in the air was like a drawn bowstring. More hours passed. Advisors shuffled in and out, occasionally whispering in Tywin's ear. They feared retribution from supporters of the late king's bride, Margaery Tyrell. They whispered of a Baron Martell's seething presence in the capital, of the unsettled environment. Meanwhile, Joffrey's body lay cold, and the city was braced for the next wave of rumor and violence. Dawn, gray and sullen, crept through the windows. Jaime found himself alone in a corner of the council chamber, slumped in a heavy chair. He had not truly slept. Cersei had gone to her rooms with quiet sobs shaking her shoulders, escorted by Pycelle. Tywin, stoic as iron, had retreated to plan the next moves. The rest of the small council vanished to tasks unknown. Jaime stared at the scuffed tabletop. A stray memory flickered. The day he had joined the Kingsguard. He had thought it an honor, a gesture of independence from his father. Looking back, he saw only folly. Just as he closed his eyes, half drifting, a shadow fell over him. "Jaime," came his father's voice. He opened his eyes to see Tywin's stern visage, but behind the stoicism there was a gleam of calculation. "Rise. We must talk." He followed Tywin into an adjacent corridor, where a single torch sputtered, making both their shadows jump on the walls. Tywin paused, turning sharply. "Joffrey is gone. We cannot bring him back. My question is, what will keep this family in power, not merely tomorrow, but a year from now or 10 years from now?" "Tommen's crowning," Jaime said, his voice gritty with fatigue. "And an end to the war, if we can manage it. We must unify the lords. Make certain that the Tyrells still stand with us." "Nah." Tywin's brows drew together. "Tommen is a kind boy, but he has none of Joffrey's force, none of his cunning. He will be malleable, easy to control for me, for you, for his mother, but the kingdom is not in a forgiving mood. We have put down one pretender or another for what feels like an age, and yet more may rise. If the lords see weakness in the Red Keep, they will pounce. The Iron Throne is no place for a kindly, soft-spoken chuck." Jaime braced himself, searching his father's face. "You want me to be the one behind Tommen's throne, is that it? You have me named as Hand? As a regent?" Tywin's lips thinned. "I want a Lannister that the realm can rally behind, one who can command respect, even fear if need be. The Tyrells talk of alliances, yes, but do not think for a moment they would not betray us if they saw advantage in it. My question stands. How do we maintain strength?" Jaime hesitated, a cold sensation creeping over him as his father's meaning took shape. Tywin Lannister was a man of illusions and half-statements, preferring others to speak their own doom. "If you're implying that I should..." He trailed off, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I swore vows to the Kingsguard, and I have no claim." Tywin exhaled, vexed. "Bastards with weaker claims than you have clawed their way onto that throne? You, at least, are the legitimate son of Tywin Lannister. The realm thrives on strength, Jaime, not on vows. You know as well as I that when you joined the Kingsguard, you did it for vanity or to spite me. That vow was a foolish thing. Better men have broken lesser vows for the sake of a kingdom." Jaime felt as though a vice gripped his chest. He had always despised being named Oathbreaker for killing the Mad King, though he knew in his heart it was the right thing. But to break another vow now, to forsake the Kingsguard's oaths and proclaim himself king, the very thought hammered against his skull. This is madness. The realm would never accept. "They will accept," Tywin said, "because you are a Lannister, because the gold of Casterly Rock will flow, because the crown will keep them in line, because no matter what the rumor mills spin about you, you remain a knight of fearsome reputation, because the city is terrified, and terrified men turn to someone they believe can protect them, and we will legitimize it in Tommen's name if we must. He can step aside. We'll call it something diplomatic. He is a child after all. You would not be seizing power from a rightful king so much as standing in for him, so that the kingdom might have a stable, capable hand upon the scepter." Natural. Jaime's lips parted to protest anew, but the words died. Tywin saw the conflict in his son's eyes and pressed on. "Cersei is grieving and growing wild with vengeance. She cannot rule unopposed. The small council has no love for her outbursts. The Tyrells might attempt to mold Tommen into their puppet, or the Martells might strike if they sense Lannister weakness. I've kept this family at the top through cunning and strength, but I am an old man, Jaime. We need a figure the realm sees as a warrior king, a man from the line of Tywin Lannister, not a boy. No. Cersei will..." Jaime began, and stopped. His sister had always wanted her children to reign, but if it meant Tommen would be in constant danger, would she prefer it? He closed his eyes. Have you spoken to her of this? You know how she is about Joffrey's seat. Maybe no. His father's stern expression remained unchanging. She will balk. But she will come to see reason if she cares for Tommen's safety. We cannot raise him up so soon after Joffrey's murder. The city will reek of suspicion. Let Tommen remain a prince in the Red Keep. Let him live and learn a few more years until the realm is calmer, until we have exposed whoever truly killed Joffrey. Jaime felt a flare of anger. You have already named Tyrion, the culprit, in public. Tywin's gaze flickered with cold calculation. And if he is guilty, he will hang. If not, we will discover who it was. Either way, the realm must see that Lannister justice is done. But that is for another day. Right now, the crown must be guided, not by a boy, but by a man with a sword hand, even if it is your left. No one is sure. Silence stretched. Jaime found no immediate riposte. He was both repelled and oddly drawn to the idea. Could he, who had never wanted the burdens of power, actually secure the realm better than Tommen? What if, in doing so, he saved Tommen's life and took the brunt of the danger upon himself? It seemed monstrous to even consider, but Joffrey's purpled face haunted him, and the memory of that child's grin when he had been smaller, less cruel, reminded Jaime of his own failings as a father. If Tommen was next, perhaps the best way to protect him was to remove him from the throne altogether. At least for now. Slowly, Jaime realized that Tywin had recognized the depth of his hesitation. In the hush, Tywin spoke again, softly this time, the edge of paternal authority replaced by something approaching persuasion. You were forced to bear the name Kingslayer for putting down a mad tyrant. Yet do you not see how the story might change? If you become king, you can shape that narrative. You can become a hero in the eyes of the realm. The man who saved the 7 kingdoms from the chaos that threatened to engulf it. Think on that. Dower. Jaime gazed into his father's eyes for a long moment, seeking any hint of compassion. He found none. Only the unwavering ambition that had built House Lannister into a force that overshadowed the monarchy itself. He swallowed. Let me think, he rasped. I cannot answer now. Tywin allowed himself a small nod. Very well. But be swift. The city is waiting. Nand. Exhausted in soul and body, Jaime retreated to his own chambers, ignoring the stares of the guards. He closed the door and slumped against it, letting out a ragged breath. The old Targaryen kings had left their ghosts in these halls, and now he felt them closing in. He thought of the vow he had broken to Aerys, the vow to protect the king with his life. He thought of the vow he had sworn anew to Joffrey, like a man stepping into the same trap over and over. What were vows worth in a realm where cunning and ruthlessness reigned supreme? He stripped out of his soiled finery and poured water from the pitcher into a basin. He splashed his face, letting the cold shock him a moment, then stared at himself in the polished metal mirror. He saw lines of fatigue, a face still handsome but scarred by experience, the golden beard scruffy from lack of care, and that stump of a right hand hidden beneath a golden contraption that never felt truly his own. Kings do not have stumps, a wry voice hissed within him. But that was nonsense. The people would bow to the power of the lion. He was the lion, or so everyone had always said. But had he the cunning of a lion or the heart? He sank into a chair by the cold hearth, letting the night spool out in silence. Dreams teased the edges of his consciousness. Memories of a tower window and a boy's scream, of a dying king thrashing before a throne of swords. Sometimes he was that boy, Brandon Stark, falling into the blackness. Sometimes he was the king, choking on his own blood. Faces of Tyrion, of Cersei, of Joffrey intruded. He jolted awake more than once, chest tight. Morning came in dull gray. The city bells did not ring for a celebration now, but for mourning. People scurried through the streets. The tension in the Red Keep was palpable. Jaime forced himself to dress, to appear in the corridor with as much composure as he could manage. Outside his door stood a pair of Kingsguard knights, white cloaks draped over their armor. eyes carefully averted. He made his way to Cersei's chambers, where he found her dismissing a maid with an angry slash of her hand. She whirled when she sensed him, her eyes rimmed with red, but her composure set in a brittle mask. Without a word, she gestured for him to enter and shut the door behind them. A single candle burned on a table, for the windows had been shuttered. Joffrey's little kitten, Sir Pounce, mewed pitifully. But there was no one to feed it, not in this chamber of grief. Cersei's voice was raw when she finally spoke. They will bury him tomorrow. The Silent Sisters have worked through the night to prepare his body. I cannot bear to see it. She looked at Jaime, lines of anguish and fury weaving across her features. Whoever did this, I want them flayed. I want them burned. I want them. Cersei, he murmured, stepping closer, trying to place a tentative hand on her shoulder. She shook him off. I heard Father speaking with some of the council. They whisper. They say the realm needs a strong hand on the throne now. They whisper that Tommen should wait. Her gaze bore into Jaime's. He's my son, our son. I won't have Father pushing him aside as if he were worthless. He is the rightful heir. Jaime drew a measured breath. He is. But he's also a boy who might not survive the same forces that killed Joffrey. And if placing Tommen on the throne now leads to more chaos, do you truly want him to suffer that? Then now, she hissed with frustration. I want the Lannisters to maintain control. I want to see justice done for Joffrey's murder. I want Tyrion hanged. And I want my children safe. You speak sense about Tommen's safety. But if not Tommen, who then? Father wants. She cut herself off, as if the words sickened her. He wants you. Jaime nodded, his heart pounding. He does. And he's not entirely wrong. The city might be less likely to rise in revolt if there's a proven warrior king on the throne. But it is a monstrous thing to consider. Our house built its fortune on cunning, not just raw power. If I take that throne, it will be an affront to every vow I ever swore. Menhir. Cersei's eyes flickered. And you claim you care about vows? You are the Kingslayer. It might as well be your destiny to hold that cursed seat. A bitter laugh escaped her. Then her voice dropped, trembling. Tommen is all I have left. Marcella is in Dorne, and Joffrey is gone. I cannot lose Tommen. You won't, Jaime said. If I claim the throne, you know Father will move mountains to secure it, and Tommen can be in line to inherit if something happens. But that's not all. If you truly cannot bear to see him raised up right now, you must at least acknowledge that giving me the crown might be better than letting Margaery Tyrell sink her claws into him. He noticed a flare of jealousy in her gaze at the mention of Margaery. If I wear the crown, if I hold the city's fear, maybe Tommen can grow. Safe from the backstabbing that took Joffrey. She pressed her lips together, eyes brimming with fresh tears she refused to let fall. You speak as if you want this. Since when did you crave power? Nakatordoin. Jaime sighed, glancing at his golden hand. I do not crave it, but I crave my family's survival. Our father has decided that I am his piece to move on this board. Perhaps it's best if I accept that role before someone else takes it and ruins us. Stannis is still out there, or men loyal to him. The North is in upheaval, and so many lords are restless. The Tyrells might be the greatest threat if they sense they can shape Tommen into their own king. What? Cersei's breathing was shallow, but a certain acceptance flickered in her eyes. If I let you do this, I will not remain silent in the background. I will be at your side, guiding you, shaping the court. I will ensure that you do not let Tyrion escape, or any other threat go unchecked. Jaime swallowed. He could not promise her Tyrion's head. Tyrion was still his brother, but he knew better than to press that point now. Do what you must, he murmured, but promise me that Tommen's safety is your first concern. If he is not under constant watch, if you see anything suspicious, you tell me at once. The Red Keep is no place for innocence. Daeton. She nodded, and at once a sort of weary relief washed over her features. A trembling overcame her, and she slumped against Jaime, letting him wrap his arms around her. For a moment, they stood in silence, the closeness reminding them both of the secrets that wove their lives together. When finally she stepped back, she cleared her throat and hastily wiped at her eyes. Father will want to announce it soon. How do you even begin such a transition? You are no Targaryen with a fabled claim, no Baratheon. The realm knows you as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. By now, I suspect Father has already prepared the lines to feed the masses, Jaime said. I am the eldest son of Tywin Lannister. I hold the blood that once produced the Queen. I have served as Kingsguard and proven my loyalty to the realm by slaying a mad king. If that is not enough, then the gold of the rock and the presence of the Lannister armies will persuade those who need persuading. She barked a short, humorless laugh. A fair summary. Well, it seems we are decided then, are we? My little brother rots in a cell, accused of regicide. My youngest son shut away for his own safety, and my lover brother becomes king. The bitterness in her tone was unmistakable, but so too was a trembling, desperate hope. Let this be the right choice, Jaime. He let out a breath. We won't know until we see it done. Within that very day, the small council convened again. Tywin was there, calm and sharp, explaining with carefully chosen words that while young Prince Tommen remained the rightful heir, the present crisis demanded an adult on the throne until such time as the realm was secure. The High Septon had been quietly approached with an offer of lavish donations and political favor, so the Faith offered no opposition. The Tyrells, somewhat taken aback, weighed their objections. Margaery was meant to be queen to Joffrey, and then presumably to Tommen, but now a new shift in the game threatened to undermine her influence. Olenna Tyrell watched Jaime with piercing eyes as if measuring his intentions. Yet she did not openly oppose him. The Tyrell fortunes were still tied to the Lannisters, and conflict might see them lose more than they gained. And so the tide turned with a surprising swiftness. Tywin prepared the official announcements, proclaiming that in light of King Joffrey's murder to ensure stability, Prince Tommen would be recognized as next in line but was still too young to rule effectively in these times. Therefore, Sir Jaime Lannister would ascend as King Regent, crowned with blessings of both the crown and the faith, until such time as Tommen came of age. A legal contrivance, an arrangement so carefully worded that it left open future transitions. But in practice, it placed Jaime on the Iron Throne. The day dawned when Jaime was to be anointed. The coronation ceremony was a somber affair, overshadowed by the fresh funeral of Joffrey. The Tyrells stood in black mourning attire, as did many in the court. The great septi was still heavy, with the perfumed smell of incense from Joffrey's funeral rites. Jaime walked through the hush, Kingsguard flanking him. He felt as though his body were moving without his mind. His left hand gripped the hilt of his sword to keep it from trembling. The golden device on his right wrist gleamed, and in his mind, an echo of that old moniker pounded, Kingslayer, Kingslayer. Now the crowd parted for him. Their eyes were a swirl of emotions. Fear, curiosity, resentment, perhaps a flicker of hope. The realm had always adored a strong leader, or at least feared him enough to obey. At the steps of the altar, the High Septon waited, flanked by Tywin, who wore his house colors and held himself with supreme confidence. Cersei stood nearby, face pale and set, dressed in mourning black. The hush was so thick Jaime thought he could hear the flicker of torches. He knelt, heart hammering. The ceremony was short compared to the lavish ritual that had accompanied Joffrey's crowning. This was a moment subdued by tragedy and necessity, or so the official line went. The High Septon poured holy oil on Jaime's brow, chanting the old prayers, naming him protector of the realm, King Regent, chosen by the gods for this time of crisis. Jaime's mouth was dry, and he found no words to recite the lines that had been fed to him by Tywin's scribes. He only bowed his head. Silence reigned. Tywin stepped forward, bearing a crown newly forged. A simpler band of gold, wrought with a lion's head at its center. No Baratheon staghorns, no Targaryen dragons, but a new symbol of the times. The gold caught the candlelight in a flash as Tywin set it gently on Jaime's head. Jaime shut his eyes. The metal felt too heavy, or perhaps that was his conscience bearing down on him. When he rose, The hall erupted in scattered applause and murmuring that died almost as quickly as it began. The weight of 100 stares pressed on him, and he forced himself to square his shoulders, letting the crown remain fixed where it was. At once, the king's guard, his own brothers in white, knelt before him, swords raised in a salute. He recalled a moment years ago when he had knelt at the feet of the Mad King to pledge his life to a monster. How many of those men around him harbored some hidden scorn? The thought hollowed him out. Cersei came next, stepping up, her skirts rustling on the marble. She curtsied, though the tears in her eyes had turned to steel. She lowered her head just enough to acknowledge him as her king. Jaime reached for her hand, and she let him kiss it. An official show of unity. Their hands were cold. Then, Tywin was at his side, guiding him gently but firmly to turn and face the crowd. Jaime saw Margaery Tyrell behind her grandmother, the girl's face a careful mask, still in mourning for the boy king who had been her husband for only a few hours. The dais was cramped with watchers, and the hush was uneasy, as if everyone waited for some dread pronouncement. Jaime drew in a breath that tasted of incense and dust. "Here now," he began, forcing his voice to carry. He paused, glancing to Tywin, who gave a slight nod. "I, Jaime of House Lannister, do vow to safeguard this realm in the name of the Seven, to hold this throne in trust until our Prince Tommen, my nephew, is of an age to bear the crown himself. I vow to seek justice for King Joffrey's murder and to lead the realm through this time of tumult with a firm hand. Let all men know that House Lannister stands strong, and the Iron Throne will not be left vacant to be preyed upon by traitors or usurpers." Benny. It was a short speech, lacking the grandeur of something a well-seasoned orator might provide. But the words were enough to spark a new wave of applause, or at least a rustle of acceptance. Jaime looked out over them all, uncertain whether he was relieved or condemned. This was his life now, whether he wished it or not. When the ceremony ended, Jaime moved heavily, crown still perched on his brow, out of the great sept. In the sunlight, the day was bright and almost mockingly cheerful, as if the gods themselves had decided to show no regard for mortal sorrow. The city folk lined the streets, craning for a glimpse. Some seemed confused. No doubt they had expected Tommen. Others stared with open distrust. But there were cheers as well, called out in uncertain voices. "Long live King Jaime! Long live the Lion!" Surrounded by gold-cloaked guards, Jaime made the slow procession back to the Red Keep, feeling as if each step took him farther from the man he had been. Beside him rode Cersei in a litter, face hidden behind a black veil. Tywin rode in stately silence, as if hearing only the cheers and ignoring the scowls. Jaime realized that beneath his father's calculated stoicism, there might be a sliver of pride. The old man had shaped this entire scenario, after all, forging Jaime into a king. And now the city, the realm, was forced to bow. But for how long? Jaime knew that foes lurked at every turn, from the Martells who hungered for vengeance to the Tyrells who seethed at losing their chance to guide a boy king. He suspected that even the faith might be uneasy behind its official blessings, for there were too many rumors about his incestuous love with Cersei, about the questionable parentage of Joffrey and his siblings. He wanted rest, but he knew rest would not come. Even that day, after the procession, after the half-hearted feasts arranged by some of the lesser lords, who dared not appear unjoyous, Tywin summoned him once more to the small council. They would speak of the future, of new laws to quell any rebellion, of how to handle the North. The Iron Bank of Braavos would have to be addressed. The affairs of a king were relentless. As Jaime took his seat at the table's head now, he felt every eye upon him. Varys, the whispery master of whispers, gave an obsequious bow, his hands tucked in his sleeves. "Your Grace," he purred. "We are pleased to serve." His face betrayed nothing, though Jaime guessed the man was already churning with plots. Pycelle droned on about the cost of funeral arrangements for the late king, about rationing, about the war's expenses. Sir Kevan Lannister sat on Jaime's right, offering stiff support. Oberyn Martell's seat was conspicuously empty, which did not bode well. Mace Tyrell puffed up his chest. offering platitudes that left Jaime's stomach churning. Cersei sat near the foot of the table, eyes fixed on Jaime. But she did not speak, letting Tywin do the talking. She was not queen now, but queen mother or some new title to that effect. Jaime had not even paused to consider what that might mean for their relationship, or for the rumors that would inevitably swirl. In the hush that followed Mace Tyrell's shallow praise, Jaime realized they all wanted him to speak, to set a tone. He forced himself to hold his posture, glancing about with the easiest air of command he could muster. "First," he said quietly, "I want every resource bent toward discovering how my nephew was poisoned. I will not suffer the murderer to escape. Lord Varys, see to it that every whisper, every rumor, is traced." Varys inclined his head. "I shall, your grace." "Second," Jaime continued, "Prince Tommen is to be guarded at all times. Sir Meryn, you will personally see that he is never alone save when I or the Queen Mother is with him. He will remain in the Red Keep, safe from potential enemies." "No." Sir Meryn bowed without enthusiasm. Jaime felt a flicker of contempt for the man. He did not trust him as far as he could throw him, but for now, it would have to do. "Third," Jaime said, "the city must see that we are strong. There will be no bread riots, no chaos in the streets. We must ensure enough food is distributed, enough watchmen posted." Lord Tywin nodded approval. The rest shifted uncomfortably. The realm was in a precarious state. Jaime could almost taste the tension in the air. It would take cunning, a relentless hand, and likely some measure of cruelty to keep it all from imploding. That day's council ended with no immediate conflicts, but Jaime knew it was only the beginning of a long, bloody path. Once the chamber emptied, leaving only him, Tywin, and Cersei behind, a silence descended. At length, Tywin spoke in his unyielding timbre. "It is done. You are king now, in all but name, until Tommen's majority. Remember, the goal is not to supplant him forever, but to maintain Lannister rule effectively. Keep that in mind before you do anything rash." Jaime turned his gaze on his father, lips tightening. "I know. Do not presume I am a fool." Tywin's expression was unreadable. "Prove it. The realm watches. One misstep could see us undone." Cersei bristled at the implied threat, but Tywin paid her no heed. He turned on his heel and left. The door echoed shut behind him. Jaime let out a breath, pressing his good hand to the crown on his head, feeling the metal shift slightly. "Will I ever grow accustomed to this cursed weight?" he muttered. Cersei came close, lifting the crown from his hair. She held it between her hands, turning it so the dim lamplight shimmered over the lion's head. Her gaze flicked to Jaime's face. "You are the one wearing it," she murmured, "but all of us bear its burden." He offered a tired grin, though no real mirth was in it. "Yes, sister. We do." The hours that followed blurred into an endless parade of tasks. Courtiers came to fawn over the new king, to press petitions, to whine about lost properties or stolen livestock. Schemers from lesser houses tried to secure new privileges or climb the ladder of favor. Jaime, never one for such intricacies, found himself longing for the clarity of a battlefield. But he forced himself to remain seated on the monstrous iron throne. Cold steel pressed into his back, swords hammered into a seat that felt like a prison. He could not show weakness, so he delivered judgments in a clipped tone, reminding himself that as king regent, his every word would shape how lords perceived him. They brought forward a poor merchant, whose wagons had been seized by city guards for fear of conspirators. Jaime ordered restitution in the name of the crown. Next came a knight demanding more men for roving bandits in the Riverlands. Jaime promised to look into it, quietly cursing the realm's fractured state. On and on it went, until the light slanted through the high windows, turning crimson with dusk. As Jaime finally rose, his back ached, and a sheen of sweat coated his neck. He removed the crown and handed it to a steward. He felt no relief in removing it, for he knew the invisible weight still lingered. In the corridor, he caught glimpses of men exchanging uncertain glances. Some bowed stiffly. It dawned on him that, to them, he was no longer Sir Jaime the Kingslayer alone. Now he was King Jaime the First, or perhaps they would brand him with a new moniker. He was an oddity, and a terrifying one. A break in the normal line of succession. Whispers would coil through the city. The Valemen might question him. The North might reject him outright. The Stormlands might remain uncertain. Still, so long as Tywin controlled the gold and the armies, they might all quietly acquiesce. For a time, as night closed in, he headed toward the royal apartments that once belonged to Robert Baratheon, then to Joffrey. Now it was his domain. The notion sat ill in his stomach. The gold and crimson drapes, the ornate lion sigils, the plush carpets, none of it felt real. A page came forward timidly, announcing that a bath had been drawn. He nodded, dismissing the boy. Alone at last, Jaime stripped and slipped into the steaming water. He leaned his head back, letting the heat seep into his sore muscles. His golden prosthetic rested on a nearby table, leaving his stump bare. He stared at it, remembering the cruelty that had robbed him of his sword hand. Now he was a king with only one good hand. The realm would no doubt gossip about that, call it a dark omen. Let them talk, he murmured. But a quiet voice inside reminded him that talk could topple kings, especially uncertain ones. He heard a rustle and opened his eyes. Cersei stood at the chamber door, half veiled in the gloom. She had changed into a loose gown, hair pulled back in a braid. In the shifting light, her face was a tapestry of tension and longing, of sorrow and desire. She shut the door behind her and moved closer. Without a word, she knelt by the edge of the tub, leaning over to place a hand on his shoulder beneath the water. He inhaled the subtle perfume that lingered in her hair. "They say tomorrow the city must gather for Joffrey's final farewell," she said softly. "We'll burn his remains in the great sept next to my father's father and the other great lords, as if that will bring him peace." Her voice trembled, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. "He was my son, Jaime. Despite everything, the cruelty, the rage, he was my child. He was ours. And now you sit in his place." Then Ranim. Jaime's throat tightened. He reached up, wrapping his hand around hers. "I know. You think I don't feel guilt, or shame, or heartbreak." His voice threatened to crack. "If I could have saved him, I would have. I loved him in my own flawed way." She stared into his eyes, then leaned in, pressing her forehead against his. For a moment, there were no words. The torchlight danced over them, reflecting off the water's surface. Jaime closed his eyes, letting the scent of her hair and the warmth of the bath create a fragile cocoon. The burdens of the realm pressed in, but for one heartbeat, he allowed himself to feel something other than the weight of duty. He felt the closeness of Cersei, the complicated love that had bound them since childhood. Then, slowly, she rose, stepping back, leaving him with the echo of her warmth. He watched her move to the window, gazing out at the city lights. "They'll never accept this without question," she said. "But at least now we have some measure of control. Tyrion will face trials soon. I'll see him executed. You cannot defend him." "Mentor." Jaime remained silent, feeling the swirl of conflict that always accompanied thoughts of Tyrion. He had no doubt that once Cersei set her mind to it, she would push Tyrion toward a noose whether he was guilty or not. But for now, Jaime let the words linger unchallenged. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes again, letting the steam curl around him. He was king regent, and the realm was a pot of simmering tensions. Ahead lay a path strewn with betrayals, alliances, and the ghosts of old oaths. He thought of how swiftly life could turn from a wedding feast to a funeral, from a vow to an abomination. The day had made him king, but at what cost? If the price of protecting Tommen and forging stability was his soul, Jaime wondered how much of himself he would have left when this was done. He stayed in the bath until the water grew tepid. When he rose, drying himself off, he saw Cersei had left quietly, the door ajar. A stirring breeze caressed the drapes. He took up the golden hand, strapping it to his wrist, feeling its cold metal nestle against his stump. Then, naked, except for that contraption, he stood at the window, staring out over the city. The fires of 1,000 torches flickered like stars in the darkness. Tomorrow, the bells would toll again for Joffrey's funeral. Tomorrow, the realm would wait for his commands. would watch for the slip that might let an enemy breach the walls. Tomorrow, the lion would have to roar, or risk being devoured. He exhaled slowly. Well, he murmured to the silent night, let them come. I'll do what must be done. It was not a knight's vow, nor a king's vow, but something in between. A promise to himself, or perhaps to the ghosts that drifted through these stone corridors. Duty, love, guilt, ambition, they were all tangled now, inextricably bound. And Jaime realized with stark clarity that in taking the throne, he had stepped onto a stage where a single misstep could unleash bloodshed unlike anything he had ever seen. Still, he had done it. Or perhaps Tywin had done it through him. It hardly mattered. If there was any redemption to be found for the man once called Kingslayer, perhaps it lay in ruling with some measure of fairness. Could he be a better king than Joffrey, than Robert, than the Mad King? The bar was low enough. Or would he become yet another in a line of tyrants, consumed by the seat that cut its occupants with 1,000 swords? He dressed at last, donning a robe of crimson velvet. He left the crown upon the table, letting it glimmer in the low light. He did not need it pressed upon his brow to feel it. The crown was with him always, like a brand, like an accusation. He stepped out into the corridor where 2 guards saluted stiffly, calling him, "Your Grace." The words grated on his ear, but he nodded, setting off down the torchlit hall. The night stretched on, filled with mutterings behind closed doors, with half-plans and whispered intrigues. The Red Keep was a labyrinth of watchers, enemies, allies, and uncertain loyalties. Jaime felt the chill in the stones beneath his feet. Perhaps it was best that he not sleep that night. The realm never slept, and as king, he could hardly afford to close his eyes. At length, he reached the small courtyard overlooking Blackwater Bay. The waters were dark, reflecting a faint moonlight. He leaned on the stone parapet, ignoring the presence of the gold cloak a few steps behind him. Somewhere out there, in the sprawl of the city, men and women huddled in taverns to gossip about this new Lannister king. Others sharpened knives. Maybe letters were racing toward Dorne, the Eyrie, the north, carrying news that would light the fires of rebellion or herald new alliances. Jaime tried to imagine the war councils, the hush of plotting. All of it came back to him. Let them plan, he thought grimly. I shall face them. I am a Lannister, after all. He remained there until a sliver of moon rose high. Then, wordlessly, he turned and made his way back into the labyrinth of the keep, guards trailing him like a silent shadow. It was time to plan for tomorrow, to meet again with Tywin and confirm the steps forward. There were alliances to cement, threats to neutralize, arrangements for Tommen's security to finalize. And always, the overshadowing presence of Joffrey's funeral. Duty after duty, chain upon chain. As he walked, the hush of the corridors reminded him of another hush. Long ago, when he had crept through the palace to slay the Mad King, determined to save the city from wildfire. Back then, he had never dreamed he would one day walk those same halls as a king. Perhaps life was nothing but a circle of ironies. Yet if he had the power to do some good, to protect Tommen, to keep Cersei safe, then maybe it was worth the cost of yet another vow broken. He ran his left hand along the scabbard at his hip, a reminder that he was not the swordsman he once was. But as king, it was not skill with the blade alone that mattered. He could command armies. He could shape laws. He could stoke fear or foster loyalty. The question was whether he could do it better than ghosts who had sat that throne before him. The gods alone knew the answer. Jaime only knew that by dawn, he must be ready to greet the realm as its newly anointed ruler, no longer the Kingslayer but King Jaime, occupant of a seat that had devoured lesser men. He wondered, with a faint smirk of fatalism, if one day the bards would call him the Kingmaker turned king, or if he'd remain the Oathbreaker in all their songs. Perhaps he would have to write his own tale, or let the city's historians spin it. For now, the night was dark, and the corridor stretched ahead, each torch a flicker of fragile light. Step by step, he advanced, each echo a heartbeat in the hush. Tomorrow would come soon enough, with all its demands. He was king now, and the realm would learn what that meant, for good or ill. Ga. Kei. Night soon surrendered to the tentative hush of dawn, and though Jaime had hardly slept, he rose when the first pale light bled through the high windows of his chambers. He felt the same weight, intangible yet potent, that had settled upon him the instant Tywin had placed that lion-crested crown upon his head. A king could not afford lassitude. The realm waited, fraught and trembling. He pulled on a simple tunic, its hue a dark crimson that would not draw too much attention to the new station he held. But even wearing a beggar's rags, he would not escape the regard of the guards stationed outside his doors. The moment he opened them, 2 gold cloaks bowed. One cleared his throat and said, "Your Grace, shall we fetch a basin for your shaving, or would you prefer we summon?" "I prefer neither," Jaime cut in. "I can shave myself." He didn't want a parade of servants flitting in and out, poking at the vulnerability he felt each morning before he was fully awake. The guard bowed, stepping aside, and Jaime went on his way, walking through the corridor with slow, measured steps. He was not accustomed to so many eyes at all hours. Even as Lord Commander of the King's Guard, he had moved with a certain autonomy, overshadowed by the presence of the king he served. Now, every scullion, scribe, and guardsman who crossed his path halted to bow, stammer "Your Grace," or simply gape. He ignored them as best he could, though each display of deference needled him with a sense of irony. The Red Keep's walls had not changed, nor had the torchlit arches of its passageways, but in some eerie way, every corner felt brand new under the burden of his crown. He found himself drifting toward the royal sept within the keep, smaller and less grand than the great sept of Baelor, but still an elegant chamber ringed by stained glass depictions of the Seven. Outside its doors, 2 silent sisters emerged, their heads covered in heavy white veils, carrying a tall brass urn. The smell of incense drifted after them. Jaime felt a pinch in his chest as he recalled that the day's rites for Joffrey's funeral would be soon. He watched them hurry along, backs bowed, never glancing up. Inside the sept, a single septon with a watery eye was finishing a private morning prayer, his voice muffled by the silence. Jaime hesitated, then slipped inside. No torches were lit, only slender candles that guttered in stands of wrought iron. Their smoky glow cast flickering shapes upon the floor. Jaime stood near the entrance, leaning briefly against the smooth stone of a pillar, unsure why he had come here. He was never one for devout worship, having long ago grown cynical toward gods who seemed indifferent to mortal struggles. Yet something compelled him to pause in this hush, perhaps the memory of all that had been lost. His mind wandered to Joffrey. Despite the boy's vicious streak, he had been Jaime's son, though unacknowledged by the realm. More memories surfaced, of Tommen's sweet laugh, of Myrcella's solemn eyes when she had been taken away to Dorne. Now he was king, but fatherhood felt more distant than ever. He wondered if in the hush of the sept, the gods saw him as a monster, or if they even cared. He did not linger long. Duty pulled him back into the corridor, and soon he made his way to the outer courtyard, where the king's retinue gathered for the funeral procession. The day's sky was pale and washed out, the sun a weak disk peeking through thin clouds. Guards in Lannister livery stood in rows. Cersei was already present, dressed in heavy black veils that all but obscured her face. What little was visible looked bloodless and drawn. She stood with Tommen, whose eyes were red-rimmed from a morning of tears. At the sight of Jaime, the boy tried to stand straighter, though he cast his gaze aside with trembling uncertainty. Marguerite Tyrell was there as well, swathed in black. Her expression was carefully schooled, a mask of appropriate mourning. She had parted from Joffrey's side under the most dreadful circumstances. As soon as Jaime arrived, she curtsied, her lips pressed together as though unsure how to greet him. "Your Grace," she murmured. There was no rancor in her tone, nor any warmth. If she felt any bitterness that Tommen was set aside from immediate kingship, she did not show it. Jaime acknowledged her with a slight incline of his head, then turned to Cersei. "Are we ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her eyes did not meet his. Then he saw the funeral bier, carefully arranged on a wagon with gilded wheels. Joffrey's body was shrouded in cloth of gold, though the face was left uncovered for now, the boy's features cold, stiff. The Silent Sisters had done their best to prepare the corpse, but no art could restore the brightness of life. A painful churn seized Jaime's stomach. That was his child, lying there, cradled by wooden planks. That was the boy he had once teased with wooden swords in the training yard. Long before cruelty eclipsed boyhood. In death, he looked small, more pitiable than terrifying. Jaime wrestled with the stab of grief and tried not to let it show on his face. At a nod from Tuin, who stood near the head of the procession, flanked by gold cloaks, the wagon lurched forward, pulled by 2 white horses. The crowd lining the courtyard parted, heads bowed. Jaime and Cersei, with Tommen and Margaery behind them, followed. The cortege moved out of the Red Keep's gates and onto the main thoroughfare that wound toward the Great Sept, escorted by Lannister guards and city watchmen. The day was eerily quiet. Though many citizens lined the route, there was no raucous shouting or sullen murmurs. Instead, there was a hush, as if the city itself still reeled from shock. Jaime could feel the press of countless eyes on him. Some might be curious, some resentful, some full of quiet relief that Joffrey's reign of terror ended. But the hush was total, broken only by the slow trundle of wagon wheel. Tywin led them all, stately and cold. His face might have been chiseled from marble. Beside him walked Kevan Lannister, stoic in his grief for his nephew but saying nothing. The Kingsguard, now truly Jaime's Kingsguard, rode their white horses behind. From the corners of his vision, Jaime caught glimpses of the gold cloaks holding the crowds at bay. He heard a woman sobbing softly in the crowd, though whether for grief or from some other emotion, he could not tell. At last, they reached the wide marble steps of the Great Sept. Wind whispered across the plaza, rustling banners of black and gold that had been hoisted in honor of the fallen king. Scores of candles burned within, their glow spilling through the tall, intricately carved doors. The High Septon and a train of septas stood waiting. As soon as the procession drew up, the wagon halted. 4 knights of the Kingsguard stepped forward to lift the shrouded body onto their shoulders with careful solemnity. Joffrey's vacant face lolled toward the sky, and Cersei made a ragged sound, pressing a hand to her mouth. Tommen gripped her other hand, tears streaming silently. Margaery stood behind them, bowed her head, and followed as the body was carried up the steps into the vast interior of the Septor. Jaime walked on Cersei's other side. Though he yearned to comfort her, he felt the distance between them growing. She seemed locked in her own private torment, her posture stiff with hatred and grief. There would be a short ceremony before the body was burned. In these days of strife, no one wanted a drawn-out vigil. The hush inside was broken by the soft chanting of the Septons, the echoes of footfalls on polished marble. Mosaics of the Seven glimmered overhead, depicted in grand panels of colored glass. Smoke from incense drifted in curling tendrils. Lords and ladies who had secured their seats in the sept turned to watch, some making the sign of the seven as the body passed. The Tyrell stood in a clump, Olenna leaning on her cane, her cunning eyes flicking toward Jaime for an instant before returning to the dead king's form. Mace Tyrell wore a look of forced sorrow. He mopped at his forehead with a perfumed handkerchief. Other houses were present, or what remained of them. There was no sign of Oberyn Martell in the front rows, though Jaime spotted the Prince of Dorne near the side, arms folded, lips pressed tight as if observing the ritual with a mixture of reluctance and smoldering resentment. Once the bier was set before the altar, the chanting swelled. Jaime stood there uncertain. He was king regent, and thus the funeral fell partly under his domain. But it was also the moment for a mother to say farewell. Cersei stepped forward first, her veil trembling with each breath. She stooped over the body, pressing her lips to the cold forehead, then pulling away as though the contact burned her. She let out a choked sound, no words forming. Tommen squeezed her hand, doing his best not to cry aloud. In the hush, Jaime cleared his throat, mustering words he hardly knew how to shape. He stepped forward, voice echoing across the marble. Joffrey Baratheon, king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, was taken from us too soon. May the Seven watch over him now and judge him fairly. May this realm find peace in his memory. Bebrine. It was brief and paltry for a eulogy. But Jaime could say no more without lying outright about Joffrey's virtues. The boy was monstrous at times, but still, he was Jaime's own blood. That was enough to raise conflicted grief within him. The High Septon picked up the thread of ceremony, chanting in a quivering voice about the father's judgment and the mother's mercy. When the chanting ended, 4 silent sisters approached with tall, slender torches. One by one they set the pyre ablaze. Candlelight and flaming torches merged into a swirl of orange and gold, engulfing the cloth of gold that wrapped Joffrey's body. The smell of perfumed oils and incense was thick, overlaying the darker scent that followed. Cersei could not bear to watch. She turned, burying her face in her hands. A hush enveloped the congregation. Jaime stared into the flames, mind drifting between memory and guilt. The flickering fire cast dancing shadows along the polished floor, and as the heat grew, the body was consumed, the boy's features obscured by smoke. Jaime felt as though he stood in the middle of a nightmare, the final proof that Joffrey was truly gone, that no matter what else happened, the child he had once known was reduced to ash and cinder. No one spoke until the last of the flames died down, leaving behind a dark husk and charred remnants of cloth. The High Septon murmured a final prayer, and that was that. Tywin gave a curt nod, and lords and ladies began to shuffle out. Some lingered near the altar, muttering condolences to Cersei, whose face remained hidden by her veil. Tommen was pallid, wiping at his eyes with a sleeve. Margaery touched his shoulder gently, as if trying to offer him some comfort. Jaime turned to leave, but then caught sight of Oberyn Martell standing nearby, arms crossed. The Red Viper's amber eyes glinted with a certain half-smile, though there was no true amusement there, only tension. Jaime inclined his head out of courtesy, but Oberyn only studied him. Their gazes locked, a silent challenge. Then Oberyn nodded once, spun on his heel, and strode off, his cloak trailing behind him. Jaime watched him go, unsettled by the man's presence. The Martells had not come to King's Landing simply to see the funeral of Joffrey. They had come for vengeance for Elia Martell, long dead. And now that Jaime was King Regent, Oberyn's eyes might turn to him with renewed fervor, suspecting any chance to redress old grievances. Tywin had placated him somewhat by offering him a seat on the small council, but it was a precarious peace at best. When at last the sept emptied out, Jaime approached Cersei gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but did not shrug him off. "Come," he said quietly. "You need rest." She shook her head, tears glinting in the corners of her eyes. "No rest for me. Not while Tyrion still draws breath. Not while the city pities me or glares at me. This was my last memory of Joffrey. I'll never see him again. Do you understand? He's gone, burnt to ash." Jaime swallowed, nodding. "I understand." He could think of nothing else to say. They left the sept, the echo of chanting replaced by the hum of the city. For all that, it felt subdued. No one cheered or shouted. The Lannister guards escorted them back to the Red Keep. Once inside, Tywin gathered them in a private corridor, away from prying ears. Margaery accompanied Tommen to give Cersei and Jaime space to speak with the old lion. Tywin surveyed them with a firm glint in his eyes. "The funeral is done. May that put an end to talk of cursed omens and ill luck plaguing our line. The realm must see that we move forward. The King Regent must be visible, and so must the house that supports him. The Tyrells remain uneasy. We must ensure their loyalty. I will entertain Lord Mace and his mother to see that they do not brood on missed opportunities. Nenebanal." Cersei's voice was dull and laced with venom. "They will brood. Margaery was to be queen. Now she's little more than a widow whose husband wore the crown for less time than it takes to drain a cup of wine. But let them brood if they like. We hold the power." Tywin arched a brow. "Careful, daughter. An alliance with Highgarden remains one of our strongest advantages. At present, we can ill afford to make enemies of them. The Iron Bank weighs on our finances, and we cannot keep the city fed and content without the Tyrell supply lines. If the Tyrells withdraw, King's Landing will starve." Mandy Manor. Jaime listened to them speak, aware that he too needed the Tyrell alliance. He touched the lion's head molded into the golden ornament around his stump, pondering how best to maintain that alliance without losing control. Let me speak with Margaery in private at some point. She might appreciate the courtesy of a conversation about her future, something to ease her humiliation. Perhaps Tommen can still be betrothed to her. That might be the simplest resolution for the Tyrell sense of honor. Bien? Yeah. Tywin nodded once. Yes, we can arrange that in time. But for now the trial looms. Tyrion's trial must proceed. The realm expects justice. Swift justice for the king's murder. And Cersei, I know you blame him, but let us not discount the possibility that others might have had a hand in it. Her face twisted. He is guilty. I know it. He humiliated Joffrey for all to see, forced him to cup the wine, and then the boy died. If Tyrion has an accomplice, let it be found. But he is not innocent. She paused, turning to Jaime. You'll not stand in my way, will you? You swore you would protect our family, and Tyrion is not the only family we have. Jaime hesitated, considering how best to answer. He would prefer Tyrion to be exonerated if he were innocent, yet Cersei was unwavering in her hatred. Tywin was watching him as well. Jaime cleared his throat. The trial must be fair, or the lords will see us as tyrants punishing a scapegoat. If Tyrion is guilty, the evidence will be plain. Cersei let out a scoff of disbelief, but before she could speak again, Tywin stepped in. Agreed. Fair in appearance, at the very least. The evidence that he held the cup, that he had reason to hate Joffrey, there's plenty to condemn him. Unless Tyrion has some miraculous defense, the outcome is certain. And to be. Jaime clenched his jaw. You mean the outcome is decided already? He tried not to sound too bitter. When is the trial scheduled? In a matter of days, Tywin said. We are finalizing the details. With the funeral concluded, the city demands closure. Tyrion's day of reckoning will not be delayed. Cersei's eyes gleamed with a savage light. She turned from Jaime and stalked down the corridor, black skirts trailing. Tywin inclined his head curtly to Jaime. We will speak more at the small council meeting this afternoon. A king must keep the realm informed of his decisions. There will be a new wave of petitions, lords believing that, with Joffrey gone, they can clamor for changes to land grants or demands for gold. Jaime offered a tight nod. I will be there. Tywin headed off in the opposite direction, leaving Jaime alone for a moment. He exhaled slowly, letting the stillness of the corridor envelop him. A pair of guards stood at attention near the archway, eyes averted, as if to spare him any sense of being watched. Jaime realized he had not eaten since dawn. He felt hollow, both from hunger and from the swirl of tension. He made his way to a small dining chamber that was often set aside for the royal family's use. Inside, he found Tommen perched at the table, nibbling absently on a pastry, eyes downcast. Margaery sat beside him, gently coaxing him to eat. She noticed Jaime and rose, dipping a slight curtsy. Tommen looked up, his gaze uncertain, as if he hardly knew how to address his newly crowned uncle. Jaime waved a hand dismissively. No need for formalities. Not in private, may I? He gestured to the empty seat across from Tommen. Margaery nodded, stepping aside so he could sit. The table was set with simple fare. Bread, cheese, a tureen of small fish and a cream sauce, a plate of pastries drizzled with honey. Tommen poked at a pastry, the corners of his mouth twitching toward a frown. Jaime could not help but remember how Tommen once used to beam at the sight of sweet treats. Now, gloom hung over him like a rain cloud. Jaime took a seat, poured himself a small cup of watered wine, and offered Tommen a faint smile. You must eat. We cannot have our prince starving himself, can we? Tommen shrugged, pressing his lips together. I'm not hungry, he whispered. Joffrey's gone and I'm supposed to just eat and pretend everything is normal. Margaery rested a hand on the boy's shoulder, her voice soft. Your brother would not want you to waste away, and the realm needs you strong. Isn't that right, Your Grace? She turned her gaze to Jaime, a subtle shift in the lines of her face. He recognized the deftness of her courtesy. the way she lightly acknowledged his rank while also reminding him that Tommen too was important. Jaime nodded. She is correct. The realm needs all the Lannisters strong right now. That includes you, Tommen. I know you loved your brother despite the difficulties. He paused, choosing his words carefully. He would not have wanted you to fade into sorrow. No older brother truly wants that for a younger sibling, not in his heart. Mine, Silver. Tommen blinked, tears shimmering. He never seemed to care about me at all. He used to laugh when I tripped during training, or throw things at me. He wasn't... Lloyd broke off, flushing. Margaery rubbed his back gently, and Jaime's chest tightened with shame. He had allowed Joffrey's cruelty to fester for too long, too bound by secrecy and confusion to intervene properly. Regardless, Jaime said softly, he was your brother. You mourn him in your own way. That's allowed. But you must keep living. For yourself, for the realm, and for the rest of us who care about you. He offered Tommen a piece of bread, and though the boy hesitated, he took it, biting into it with small motions. Margaery gave Jaime a small, grateful nod. Once Tommen had chewed a bit, Jaime took the chance to speak privately with Margaery. Lady Margaery, the King Regent's seat at court is new to us all. I trust you have not been made to feel unwelcome? She offered a polite smile. I have been treated as well as can be expected, under the circumstances. You've only just been crowned, so I suppose we're all still finding our places. I do wonder what role I shall play in the days to come. I was to be Joffrey's queen, but fate has denied me that honor. Jaime noted how carefully she chose the word honor. He remembered how Joffrey tormented her at times, though she hid her revulsion behind a graceful exterior. You remain part of the royal family, he said. Nothing has changed that. Even if Joffrey's gone, you are still a widow of a king. We are in the midst of discussing new betrothals. For Tommen, perhaps, if that is something you and your family would wish to pursue. Nah. Her eyes flickered. I suspected as much. Tommen is very young, though. We would not want to rush him into a marriage he does not understand. But he is sweet and gentle. I would sooner have a gentle husband than a cruel one. That is no secret, I think. Tommen looked up, face reddening. I don't know if I can be a husband, he said in a small voice. I'm not ready. And Margaery, you're so beautiful, I wouldn't know what to do. A hint of genuine warmth crept into Margaery's tone. That's quite all right, Tommen. A betrothal need not be consummated until you're older. It could simply be a promise for the future. I would be your companion, teaching you about the realm and the duties we might share. Nanny then. Yes. Jaime intervened gently. We'll discuss it all in due time. For now, let us focus on healing from our loss. The crown will keep the Tyrell alliance close, I promise you. There is no need to fear. We Lannisters honor our pacts. He realized the irony of that statement. House Lannister had broken or twisted many pacts in recent times. But Margaery offered a gracious nod, seemingly content with the reassurance. They finished their light meal in relative silence. Tommen drank some watered wine and ate enough to banish the pallor from his cheeks. Then Margaery led him away, promising to take him to see the palace gardens, hoping fresh air might lift his spirits. Jaime lingered a moment, finishing his own cup. He wondered if he was doing right by Tommen. The boy would have been safer in the shadows, away from the deadly politics of King's Landing. And yet, here he was, at the heart of it all. After a time, Jaime gathered himself and made his way to the small council chambers. No matter the gloom of the day, the realm's governance demanded attention. The guards opened the heavy double doors, and the voices within died as Jaime entered. Tywin was already seated at the head of the table, but upon seeing Jaime, he stood and offered the seat to him. It was a gesture that reminded everyone present of Jaime's new station. King Regent, outranked even Tywin Lannister. Jaime took his seat, noting who was in attendance. Pycelle sat near the old lion, face half hidden behind that voluminous white beard. Varys was perched on the opposite side, hands folded in his voluminous sleeves, eyes calm and unreadable. Sir Kevan Lannister sat near the foot, expression carefully neutral, though Jaime knew Kevin was loyal to Tywin above all. Mace Tyrell was there as well, adjusting the collar of his doublet and casting glances at the unoccupied seat that might have been a baron's. The Dornish prince had not yet arrived, if he planned to at all. Jaime cleared his throat, looking to Tywin. "Shall we begin?" Tywin inclined his head, deferring the floor to his newly crowned son. Jaime turned to face the assembled council. "We've concluded the funeral for King Joffrey. The realm will grieve as it wills, but we must not allow chaos to take root. Each of you has responsibilities that cannot be neglected." "Lord Tywin, you mentioned a shortage of coin for the City Watch?" Tywin acknowledged him. "Indeed. The Crown's debts to the Iron Bank grow heavier by the day. We have shipments of grain from the Reach to feed King's Landing. But the City Watch, as well as the gold cloaks, require pay if we are to keep them loyal. We must reorganize our finances. You, as King Regent, may wish to consider new taxes or reallocation of certain funds." Mace Tyrell cleared his throat. "We at Highgarden have been providing ample harvests for King's Landing. My coffers bear the burden, though we do so willingly, for the sake of alliance. However, I would be grateful to see some formal recognition of my contribution. Perhaps a decree guaranteeing certain shipping rights, or a favorable trade tariff for our port at Old Town." "Nedium?" He smiled broadly, though his eyes were calculating. Jaime recognized the typical bargaining that accompanied the Tyrell's assistance. The realm was a patchwork of deals, each new pledge requiring a nod in return. Jaime exchanged a glance with Tywin, recalling his father's earlier warning that they must keep the Tyrells happy. "That can be arranged," Jaime said, careful to keep his tone cordial. "The Master of Coin's position is vacant since Lord Baelish departed. We will need a new Master of Coin to see to the specifics. Until such time, I ask that you, Lord Tyrell, liaise with Sir Kevin to ensure that our immediate needs are met. We can draft a royal decree acknowledging the generosity of House Tyrell and guaranteeing certain trade benefits." "Boni." Mace brightened, nodding vigorously. "You are most gracious, Your Grace. I shall see it done, you have my word." Tywin moved briskly on to the next matter. "Regarding the war efforts, some of the realm is still in unrest. The Riverlands remain fractious. The Freys hold the Twins, but the local lords resent them for their treachery at the Red Wedding. We must ensure that King's peace is upheld. We have lords to placate, especially if Riverrun and other strongholds show signs of dissent. The North also remains in question, though the Boltons claim dominion there as our loyal wardens. Stannis Baratheon lingers at Dragonstone, presumably plotting. We have not had fresh word from him in weeks, but we cannot be complacent." "The Uensar." Jaime rubbed his forehead, feeling the swirl of problems. "We cannot fight on all fronts. We must consolidate. Perhaps we should send envoys to treat with the Riverlords, to ensure their loyalty through formal pardons and renewed appointments. As for the North, if the Boltons can keep it quiet, let them. In time, we'll see if they truly hold that territory. Then," he glanced around the table. Varys stirred with a measured cough. "On the matter of the North, my little birds whisper that Roose Bolton's grasp may not be so firm as he claims. Word drifts of skirmishes, of stray wolf banners. There is talk of surviving Stark loyalists. And rumors swirl of a young man claiming to be the late Lord Eddard's son, possibly a trick or an impostor. I cannot confirm." Jaime's gut twisted at the mention of Ned Stark's progeny. He thought of Bran, of Rickon, of the two others. So many had died or vanished. "Stark loyalists," he muttered. "We'll keep an ear on those rumors, but for now the real threat is Stannis. We cannot let him regroup. If he attempts to strike again at King's Landing with a new alliance or with foreign gold, we must be prepared." Mace Tyrell puffed up his chest. "If he dares challenge the throne again, House Tyrell will provide men. He lost at the Blackwater once, and we shall humiliate him again. Now." A short silence followed, and Jaime glimpsed Varys' slight smile. There were always new threats in the realm, but for the moment, King's Landing was not in open war. Jaime returned his attention to the gold cloaks and the City Watch. He instructed Pycelle to see that certain funds were disbursed from the royal treasury to keep morale high among the guards. especially after the shock of Joffrey's death. No man would guard the city well if he was uncertain of his next meal, or if he suspected turmoil at the top. Eventually, the matter of Tyrion's trial came up. Tywin wasted no time. The trial will proceed in 3 days' time, with myself, Prince Oberyn Martell, and Lord Tyrell presiding as judges. Your Grace may attend in person, though not as a judge. We must maintain the facade of impartiality. Jaime's chest tightened. He nodded. Yes, I will attend. Tyrion is my brother after all. I want to see how he defends himself. Pycelle coughed wetly, stroking his beard. A shame. His cunning tongue may fool some, but I doubt it will fool us all. We have ample reason to suspect him. Why else would the Queen's cup have been left in his care? Simon. Jaime drummed his fingers on the table. We shall see. Proceed. Let the city watch remain on high alert. I do not want chaos in the streets when word spreads that the trial is about to begin. Tywin offered a thin smile. Good. Then we are settled. The session is ended. Unless there is further business. No one spoke. Jaime stood, signifying the close of the meeting. The lords rose, bowing to him. He strode out, wishing it had not been so short and yet so heavy. Varys lingered, offering a polite smile as Jaime passed. Your Grace, might I have a word in private? Jaime paused, exchanged a glance with Tywin, then nodded. Very well, come. They moved to a small alcove near an arrow-slit window. Tywin continued on his way, leaving them alone with only the echo of footsteps in the corridor. Varys clasped his hands. I know your mind weighs heavily on Tyrion's fate. I would caution you not to appear too eager to help him. The Queen is most determined to see him convicted. Many suspect you share that sentiment, though the rumors of your closeness to Tyrion do exist. Jaime regarded him coolly. And you are telling me this because... Varys blinked with exaggerated innocence. Because I serve the realm naturally. A king regent's position can be undermined if the people believe he secretly aids an accused regicide. If your brother is proven guilty, you risk your reputation by defending him. Conversely, if there is a shred of truth that someone else orchestrated this, it would serve you well to discreetly discover it. Jaime studied the eunuch's placid face, searching for hidden motives. There is evidence of Tyrion's innocence. Speak it. You thrive on secrets. You must have some whisper of the truth. Varys spread his hands. Alas, the truth is rarely so straightforward. I only know that Lord Baelish left the city shortly before the wedding, and that the amethyst strangler, a rare poison, might have been involved. Who had access to it? Tyrion had knowledge of poisons. True, but so do others. The Queen of Thorns, perhaps, or even the Fool Dantos. The evidence is as scattered as leaves in the wind. Jaime frowned, recalling how Sansa Stark had vanished from the wedding, as well, rumored to have fled under suspicious circumstances. It was easy for others to assume she was complicit in the murder. If Tyrion truly conspired with Sansa, or with Baelish, the realm will expect him to die. But if he's innocent, Varys bowed his head. Your Grace, I offer only this suggestion. Keep your eyes open. My little birds sing in many corners, but the truth can hide even from them. If you wish to preserve your brother, you must outmaneuver the Queen, and in so doing you risk your alliance with her. Jaime felt a stab of discomfort. He knew exactly how fiercely Cersei loathed Tyrion. Thank you for your counsel, he said at last, dismissing Varys with a nod. I will keep it in mind. Varys bowed deeply and drifted away, silent as a wraith. Jaime stood by the narrow window for a moment, gazing out at the city. The sky was bright now, and from this vantage, he could see the dusty sprawl of rooftops, the winding streets that led toward the harbors. A city full of secrets. If Tyrion was indeed innocent, then Joffrey's murderer walked free among those streets. The realm clamored for justice, and Jaime, the king regent, was caught between the demands of his sister and the doubt gnawing at his own conscience. If he let Tyrion hang without certainty, it would be one more stain upon his soul. But if he defied Cersei to spare Tyrion, he risked fracturing the Lannister unity that Tywin strove to maintain. The next days blurred in a swirl of royal business and quiet dread. Jaime held court twice, hearing petitions from lesser lords. He ruled on disputes with careful neutrality, mindful not to appear partial. The new crown upon his head drew flattery and suspicion alike. Each evening, he walked the halls, seldom sleeping more than a few hours, always alert for the slightest hint of treachery. At times, he visited the training yard, determined not to let his left-handed swordsmanship lapse. Though not what he once was, he practiced diligently, ignoring the stares of younger knights. He needed the release. Each slash of his sword let him burn off tension. Sir Loras Tyrell was sometimes present, a lithe figure with quick reflexes. Though the man's courtesy was grudging at best, Jaime wondered if Loras resented him for overshadowing Margaery's claim to the throne. Still, they danced around each other, feinting, parrying. A handful of times, Jaime felt the lion inside stir as he managed a deft riposte with his left hand, surprising Loras enough to draw an admiring grunt. But at night, he would return to bed alone, or sometimes to have arguments with Cersei, if she permitted him in her chambers. Their intimacy was fraying beneath her grief. Whenever she looked at him, Jaime saw the unspoken question. Would he stand by her and see Tyrion condemned, or would he betray her to save the dwarf? That tension hovered like a storm cloud, crackling with silent lightning. At last the day of the trial arrived. A hush settled over the Red Keep that morning, as if the very stones felt the gravity of what was about to unfold. The throne room was prepared, with rows of seats for the lords and ladies who wished to witness the spectacle. At the front, a wooden platform had been erected for the judges. Tywin took the center seat, his face carved in stone. To his right, Prince Oberyn lounged with feline grace, wearing red and gold with the proud son of Dorne emblazoned. To Tywin's left, Mace Tyrell sat, his expression uncertain, though he tried to project solemn authority. Jaime arrived early, wearing a kingly cloak of deep crimson over black breeches and tunic. He took a seat slightly behind the judges, near the Iron Throne, so all eyes would see he was present and watchful. Cersei, clad in black with gold trim, sat near him, though a few steps away, her posture rigid. The gallery began to fill with courtiers. Whispers swelled like a tide. There were those who despised Tyrion, those who pitied him, and those who simply craved the drama of a trial for regicide. Pycelle looked smug, adjusting his chain of office. Varys stood quietly off to one side, hands folded. At last, Tyrion was brought in, escorted by gold cloaks. He wore plain garb, and his face was drawn and pale, but he held his head high, scanning the assembled crowd with defiance. His eyes flicked to Jaime, holding them for a moment, then to Cersei, who glared at him with open loathing. Tyrion's mouth tightened. He kept silent, though, as the judges called for order. Tywin's voice rang through the hall. "We are gathered to judge Tyrion of House Lannister, accused of the murder of King Joffrey Baratheon. The penalties for regicide are severe, and the realm demands justice. We shall hear the evidence. Tyrion, you stand before us. How do you plead?" Tyrion's chin rose. "I plead not guilty." His voice carried clearly. "I loved my nephew." He paused, noticing Cersei's scornful hiss. "Despite our differences, I did not poison him. That is the truth." And so, the trial began. One by one, witnesses were called. Ser Meryn Trant spoke of how Tyrion had slapped the king before, how he had always shown disrespect. Pycelle stammered through an account of how Tyrion had once threatened him, pointing out that his stores of poisons were ransacked when Tyrion was hanged. The Tyrells had their own recollections, gleaned from the wedding feast, how Tyrion poured wine, how the cup lingered in his hand. Each testimony chipped away at Tyrion's defense. Jaime watched in silence, anger boiling in his chest. The trial was a farce, a performance designed to condemn Tyrion. All of Joffrey's humiliations at Tyrion's hand were dredged up, painting him as a hateful, vengeful uncle. No mention was made of Joffrey's cruelties or the real tensions behind the scenes. Cersei's eyes shone with triumph whenever a fresh accusation landed. Tyrion fought back with words when he could, but each protest was waved off. Oberyn looked mildly intrigued, occasionally pressing a question. but he did not seem inclined to defend Tyrion. Mace Tyrell nodded self-importantly, as if every word from the prosecution was gospel. At last, the session paused for a recess. Tyrion was led away under guard, trembling with suppressed rage. Jaime remained in his seat, ignoring the curious glances. The second half of the trial would reconvene shortly, and Jaime dreaded what it might hold. He could see Cersei's satisfaction building. This was everything she had hoped for. The axe was poised above Tyrion's neck. Unless some miracle intervened, he would be found guilty, and the next step would be execution. Jaime rose and slipped away from the throng, ignoring attempts by lesser lords to engage him. He made his way to a narrow corridor leading to the cells, waiting until Tyrion emerged with his guards. Jaime gestured for the guards to stand aside. They hesitated, but he flashed the authority of the King Regent in his gaze, so they backed off a short distance. Face to face with Tyrion, Jaime pressed his lips together. "They mean to condemn you, little brother. You must see that." Tyrion's shoulders sagged, though he let out a bitter laugh. "Yes, well, I'm hardly surprised. Have you come to watch me beg for my life? Or did Father send you with a sweet promise of mercy if I confess?" "Tyrion?" Jaime shook his head quickly. "No. Tyrion, if you are innocent, I would see you live. But you must present stronger evidence. Is there anything at all, that might exonerate you?" Tyrion snorted. "I have no champion witness, if that's what you mean. Sansa fled, and the city presumes we conspired together. Baelish vanished. I have only the memory that I didn't poison him, which the court cares little about. This is a staged production, Jaime." Jaime clenched his jaw. He remembered Varys' warning. "I fear you're right. Perhaps we can find a way for you to demand a trial by combat." Tyrion's eyes narrowed. "Trial by combat? Who would champion me? Bronn. He's a sellsword, and I'm not sure he'd stand against whoever Cersei selects. Not now that she can outbid me. Or maybe you're offering yourself, big brother. Are you so certain of your left-hand skill?" Jaime felt a sting in his pride. He knew he was not what he once was. He paused, struggling. "If it meant saving you, I would try, but it might be suicide. Is there someone else you trust?" Tyrion's expression was bleak. "I trust no one in King's Landing. But if this farce continues, I might have no choice but to demand the combat, and pray for a miracle. They're parading false witness after false witness, twisting every word I ever said to Joffrey. The court wants blood, not truth." Jaime gripped Tyrion's shoulder. "Hold steady. There might still be a chance. Don't lose hope." Tyrion's laugh was hollow. "Hope? That's a poor shield against a headsman's axe. But I appreciate the sentiment, dear brother. Now, if you'll excuse me, the guards want to return me to my cell before the second half of the farce begins." Jaime nodded and stepped aside, letting the guards take Tyrion away. Frustration gnawed at him. He had expected the trial to be rigged, but seeing it firsthand lit a fire in his gut. He recalled the final stroke that had condemned Ned Stark, back when they'd first warred with the Starks. How King Joffrey had demanded Ned's head, despite a deal that might have spared him. History repeated itself in these halls. Justice was whatever those in power decreed. And though Jaime was King Regent, it was Tywin and Cersei orchestrating the show. He returned to the throne room, the crowd murmuring expectantly for the next round. Cersei was whispering with Pycelle near the dais, probably preparing yet another witness. Jaime saw the flush of satisfaction in her cheeks, and felt a pang of sorrow for how far they had drifted. She truly believed Tyrion guilty, and wanted nothing more than to watch him die. The realm, meanwhile, was enthralled by the spectacle. When the trial resumed, the final witness to appear was none other than Shae, Tyrion's former lover. Jaime watched Tyrion's face twist in horror as the woman spun a tale of how Tyrion schemed to murder Joffrey, how he had forced Sansa's complicity. Whether she was threatened or bribed was unclear, but her words stabbed Tyrion's defense like a blade. Even Oberyn seemed taken aback, though he eyed her with skepticism. Mace Tyrell nodded along eagerly, and Tywin wore a mask of cold composure, as though everything were unfolding exactly as planned. Tyrion finally erupted in fury, railing at the hypocrisy of the court. He decried the city and how it treated him, how he had saved them from Stannis only to be scorned. He shouted that he wished he had been the monster they portrayed. Then, in a final ringing proclamation, he demanded trial by combat. Gasps spread through the hall. Cersei's lips curved into a savage smile. Tywin barely blinked. Oberyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued. The tension was electric. Jaime felt his pulse hammer. Tyrion had thrown the dice. Now the question was, who would fight for him? And who would Cersei name as her champion? Tywin, with measured coolness, accepted Tyrion's demand. The court was dismissed until the morrow, when the champions would be named. Tyrion was led away, shaking with fury and desperation. Jaime stood, muscles knotted with dread. If no champion rose to defend Tyrion, he was doomed. And if Jaime stepped forward, he would face whoever Cersei chose, likely the Mountain or some other unstoppable brute. With only his left hand at his disposal, could he match such a monstrous foe? The memory of sparring left-handed flitted through his mind. He was better than before, but not half the swordsman he once was. Before he could form a plan, Cersei was at his side, her voice low and trembling with dark satisfaction. He has chosen the path of a fool, and I know precisely whom I shall name as the crown's champion. Sir Gregor Clegane. Jaime's mouth went dry. Gregor Clegane was the last man he wanted to face, especially now. Cersei's eyes burned with a twisted light, daring him to stop her. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The day ended in a swirl of murmurs as courtiers swept from the hall, anxious to see tomorrow's spectacle. Jaime stood there, more burdened than ever, uncertain whether he could cross his sister or if he should even attempt to. If Tyrion had no other champion, then the Mountain would slaughter him. Night fell, hot and breathless, over King's Landing. Within the Red Keep, tension coiled, waiting. Jaime roamed the corridors, haunted by the memory of Joffrey's dead face, by the knowledge that he might soon see another Lannister lost to the headsman. He was King Regent, yet he felt trapped in Tywin and Cersei's snare. If he did nothing, Tyrion would die. If he stepped up, he might lose his life fighting Gregor Clegane, and even if by some miracle he won, he would incur Cersei's lifelong wrath for overturning her vengeance. That night, when he reached Cersei's door, he found it bolted, the guards crossing their halberds, quietly informing him the Queen Mother required solitude. He did not protest. What would he say to her anyway? He ended up in his own chambers, alone with his thoughts and the suffocating weight of the crown. The city outside was quiet, but not peacefully so, merely anxious, as if the entire population held its breath for the duel that would decide Tyrion's fate. Jaime paced, rubbing his temple. He recalled with bitter regret all the times he had mocked Tyrion's insecurities, or treated him dismissively. He did care for his brother. Tyrion was cunning, quick-witted, often far better at words than Jaime had ever been. But in a trial by combat, wit could not parry a sword. He wondered if Bronn might still champion Tyrion for enough gold. Yet word had it that Cersei had ensured Bronn was offered a better marriage, one that tied him more to the Lannister cause than to Tyrion. Another blow that left Tyrion friendless. The only other possibility was Prince Oberyn Martell. Rumor had it he desired a duel with the Mountain to avenge his sister Elia. But would Oberyn side with Tyrion out of convenience? Jaime sank into a chair, leaning his head back. If Oberyn fought, he might kill the Mountain, or the Mountain might kill him. In either case, Tyrion might be freed or condemned. But why would Oberyn risk his life for Tyrion? His real target was Tywin, who had presided over the atrocities in the sack of King's Landing. Could Jaime approach him, broker some arrangement? He thought of Oberyn's eyes. The way they glinted with contained fury when he'd watched the funeral. The man was dangerous, but cunning enough to see an advantage in humiliating Tywin. At last, well past midnight, Jaime decided. He would speak to Oberyn. If the Red Viper was willing to champion Tyrion, that might be Tyrion's only chance at survival. If that failed, Jaime might yet step forward himself, though it would almost certainly mean his own death. Better that he died in an honorable attempt to save his brother than live with the guilt of letting him die for a crime he did not commit. He rose, crossing to the window, gazing out over the moonlit rooftops. The silhouette of the great Septet rose in the distance, silent and imposing. He let out a slow breath. The realm was no closer to peace. Joffrey was ashes, Tyrion's life hung by a thread, and Tywin and Cersei steered the ship as though the King Regent were a mere figurehead. Jaime gritted his teeth. If he was truly king now, at least for a time, he must seize the reins, or he would be devoured by the cunning of others. The Iron Throne demanded more than presence. It demanded action. Perhaps saving Tyrion was the first step in proving to himself that he could do more than stand idle, while his family destroyed itself from within. In that moment, the crown on his table caught the silver gleam of moonlight, the lion's head crest shining as if in accusation. Jaime turned from it, heart pounding. Tomorrow, the stage would be set for trial by combat. Tomorrow, Tyrion's champion must come forward, or he would die alone. With grim resolve, Jaime strode to the door, summoned a guard, and set off to find the Prince of Dorne before dawn. If there was any hope at all, it lay in forging a risky alliance with the Red Viper, who might see in Tyrion's plight a chance to strike a blow at House Lannister's darkest secret. And so Jaime went, each step echoing in the silent halls, the weight of the crown in every breath he drew. He would do what he must, for Tyrion, for Tommen, for whatever thread of honor still remained in the man once named Kingslayer. The night swallowed him as he disappeared into the labyrinth of the keep, bracing himself for the day to come, when the Red Viper and the Mountain would cross swords in the name of justice, and decide the fate of a dwarf who might be the only truly innocent man in King's Landing. And Jaime trod the quiet halls with steps as soft as a ghost's, the clank of his own scabbard, an unwelcome echo in his ears. The Red Keep's corridors felt endless at this hour, their walls streaked by the meager flicker of torches guttering in iron sconces. Each time he passed a guard, he murmured a curt, "You may stand aside," so he could slip on without question. Word would spread by morning that the King Regent had walked these halls in search of the Prince of Dorne. But if Jaime had any hope of saving Tyrion from the Mountain's hammer, he had no time for secrecy. He found Oberyn Martell in a portion of the keep seldom visited by the court, near a suite of chambers set aside for guests of high station. A pair of Dornish guards stood watch. Their dark eyes flicked with surprise when Jaime approached, but they parted wordlessly at a subtle hand gesture from their prince, who had heard the footfalls. Oberyn was leaning against a balustrade, overlooking the blackness of the gardens below. Moonlight caught in his hair, turning it silver at the edges. He wore a loose robe belted with cloth of gold, revealing a triangle of bronzed skin at his chest. His posture was languid, but his eyes were sharp in the gloom, like a cat's that had scented prey. "King Regent?" Oberyn said without turning, his voice touched by amusement. "I suspected I might see you tonight, or perhaps tomorrow morning, just before the combat. But I am pleased you came sooner. The night is more interesting this way." Jaime approached, the swirling tensions of the day lodged in his lungs. "You suspected I'd come to you? Why?" Oberyn let out a low laugh. "Because you are not a fool, Kingslayer. The Mountain is the champion your sister has chosen, and Tyrion has demanded trial by combat. There are precious few in King's Landing who would dare fight Gregor Clegane, least of all in a cause that defies your father's will. You know, I have reason to cross swords with that beast. So here we stand." "Then number one," Jaime swallowed. "I'm no fool, yes, but I've not come to strong-arm you. I doubt I could. I came because I believe my brother is innocent, and I believe you desire justice for the death of Princess Elia and her children. This might be your chance to kill the man who inflicted those horrors." Oberyn turned, leaning elbows on the balustrade, glancing sidelong at Jaime. His face was half-shadowed by moonlight. "You surprise me. I expected an appeal for mercy, or perhaps an attempt to bribe me, yet you speak as if you'd help me kill Gregor. Is that not a betrayal of your father's designs?" Jaime's jaw tensed. "I won't pretend my father wants Tyrion to live, but my father is not king. I am. And if Tyrion is innocent, I won't see him butchered for a crime he didn't commit." He paused, trying to read Oberyn's expression, but the prince's face was shuttered. "You can't deny you want to stand against the Mountain. I heard rumors in the city that you've been hungering for that chance. Will you do it? Bawanshu. For a moment, Oberyn was silent. The wind teased the edge of his robe, revealing more of his slender, coiled physique. I have sworn vengeance for my sister Elia, he said at last. All these years, I have waited for an opportunity to confront her killer in a fair fight. Oh, I have heard men say that Gregor was only a tool, that the orders came from on high. But removing this tool from the world will at least give me some satisfaction. Yet to champion your brother is also to champion House Lannister in a twisted sense. And I despise your father. So you see the dilemma. Then no. Jaime exhaled, stepping closer so they spoke in hushed tones. It isn't House Lannister you'd be championing, but justice. Joffrey's real killer remains at large, and Tyrion's conviction is a travesty. If you do nothing, the Mountain wins. He'll, whomever stands for Tyrion, if anyone stands at all, and my brother will be executed. Then House Lannister remains unbroken. So my father and sister remain as strong as ever. No retribution, no truth, nothing. If you face the Mountain and win, you get revenge for Elia, and you save Tyrion's life. That would be quite a blow to my father, no? Betakawan. Oberyn's lips twitched, and he inclined his head. You make a compelling argument, Kingslayer. And if I kill the Mountain in a trial by combat for Tyrion's sake, then your dear father must abide by the decree of the gods. Tyrion would be set free by law. Imagine Tywin Lannister's face when he is forced to watch the Red Viper deliver him a humiliating defeat. A slow grin spread over Oberyn's features. Jaime's heart thudded. It was exactly the scenario he hoped for. He'll try to manipulate the outcome some other way, but in a public trial by combat, even father's manipulations have limits. The champion's victory is final. He hesitated, voice dipping. Will you do it? Oberyn reached out and laid a hand lightly on Jaime's golden prosthetic. The metallic surface glimmered under the moon. If I do, you must promise me something. Jaime's pulse quickened. Name it. I want answers from your father regarding Elia's final hours. There is no question the Mountain did the deed, but I want Tywin's complicity laid bare. If I kill Gregor, I want your father's confessions as well. He may never stand trial, but I need him to speak the truth. Oberyn's gaze locked onto Jaehaerys. Swear that you will help me pry that truth from him as king, if I fight for Tyrion. Jaime exhaled through his teeth. Father will never talk willingly. He'll deny it or claim ignorance. You know what kind of man he is. That is why I need your vow. You are the king regent, not a mere puppet. Or so I'm told. If you want my sword, be prepared to pay with your father's secrets. He will yield to you, or you will dethrone him. Are you prepared to do that, Kingslayer? Name her. Jaime felt his throat tighten. To dethrone Tywin was madness. House Lannister's entire power was woven from Tywin's cunning. Yet here he stood, confronted with a chance to spare Tyrion. If Gregor died, Oberyn's thirst might not end there. Jaime could see the entire predicament unraveling. But was there truly a choice? Tyrion's life hung in the balance, and perhaps Jaime's own soul along with it. All right, he said, voice gruff. If you champion Tyrion and kill Gregor, I'll bring you what truth I can from father. I can't promise I'll weep confessions at your feet, but I will do everything in my power as King Regent to see you get some form of resolution. Oberyn's hand slipped off the gold prosthetic. He seemed quietly satisfied. That is enough for now. Very well, I will champion your brother. Let us see how eagerly the Mountain handles a spear kissed by the Dornish sun. His eyes gleamed with lethal anticipation. Thank you, Jaime said, meaning it. You'll need to make that declaration in the throne room before midday tomorrow, or else Cersei will attempt to force the matter. She wants to name Sir Gregor and see no one stand for Tyrion, so that the verdict is swift. Oberyn shrugged, unconcerned. I relish a little spectacle. Don't worry, I'll make my entrance at precisely the moment it causes the greatest stir. I look forward to seeing your sister's face when I do. He turned away, back toward the shadows of the corridor. Now go, King Regent. We both need rest. I'd prefer not to be half asleep when I fight that mountain of a man. Now. Jaime dipped his head and left quickly. On his return through the lamplit hallways, His footsteps no longer dragged with the same dread. There was at least a chance now, a real chance Tyrion might survive. And if Oberyn triumphed, it would mark the first truly decisive act of Jaime's short reign. He only hoped that the cost, Oberyn's demands for Tywin's confession, would not destroy them all. By the time he reached his chambers, dawn hovered on the horizon, a thin gray line dividing night and day. He stripped off his clothes and sank onto his bed. Sleep came in fitful snatches, nightmares swirling, images of the mountain sword crashing down, of Tyrion's severed head rolling across blood-slick marble, of Oberyn's triumphant grin shifting into a viper's hiss. He awoke several times, heart hammering, but forced himself to lie still, until at last the bells of sunrise roused the keep. He dressed somberly, mindful of what lay ahead. In the corridor, the usual retinue of guards stood at attention, greeting him with bows. Jaime responded with curt nods, ignoring their searching gazes. The hush that had pervaded the castle for days was heavier than ever. Word must have spread. Tyrion demanded trial by combat, and Cersei chose the mountain. Many remembered Gregor's monstrous reputation. The realm had seldom seen his equal in brutality. At midday, a crowd gathered in the throne room. Same as the day before. Jaime took his seat near the Iron Throne, wearing a simpler circlet rather than the full lion-crested crown that weighed so heavily on his brow. Cersei was perched on a dais across from the line of spectators, dressed in black so deep it seemed to swallow the light, her golden hair pinned severely. Tywin was in his seat at the judges' platform, flanked by Mace Tyrell, who fussed with his embroidered sleeves, and an empty seat where Oberyn Martell was supposed to be. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Where was the Red Viper? Tyrion was escorted in by 2 gold cloaks, chains clinking at his wrists. He scanned the room, anxiety etched into the lines of his face. Jaime caught his gaze, offered the faintest of nods, hoping Tyrion understood it was not hopeless. Tyrion's eyes narrowed, flicking toward the absent Oberyn's seat, and Jaime saw him swallow. Then, with a rush of motion, Oberyn strode in from the far side of the hall, wearing light leather armor tinted a golden hue. The sun and spear of House Martell emblazoned across his chest. A hush fell, spiked with a tremor of shock. He walked past the crowd, each step measured, hips swaying like a dancer's, and took his seat beside Tywin without so much as a glance at the man. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Tyrion. A flicker of a smile touched Oberyn's lips. Tywin rapped a staff on the floor to call for silence. "We have assembled to confirm the champions for this trial by combat, demanded by the accused, Tyrion Lannister. The crown's champion has been named, Sir Gregor Clegane. Tyrion Lannister, who do you name as your champion?" Oberyn stood before Tyrion could speak. "He names me." His voice rang out, smooth and dangerous. "I, Oberyn Martell, Prince of Dorne, will stand for Tyrion Lannister and the cause of justice." A shocked ripple coursed through the courtiers. Tyrion's mouth parted. He stammered, You would risk your life for me." He sounded almost disbelieving. Oberyn nodded, not without a hint of wry amusement. "I have my reasons." Then he turned, letting his gaze rest on Cersei. "I imagine the Queen Mother is well aware of them." Cersei's lips pressed into a thin, furious line. She stared daggers at Oberyn, then at Jaime. Jaime could almost hear her silent accusations. "You meddled. You arranged this." The entire court was watching, tension thrumming. Tywin's face was unreadable, though Jaime recognized the flicker of fury in his father's eyes. But publicly, Tywin had no choice. "Very well," he announced in a voice devoid of emotion. "Sir Gregor Clegane stands for the crown. Prince Oberyn Martell stands for the accused. The duel will take place in the courtyard within the hour. The gods shall guide the outcome. Should Prince Oberyn prevail, Tyrion Lannister shall be deemed innocent. Should Sir Gregor prevail, Tyrion shall be executed for regicide." A murmur welled up, half excited, half fearful. Servants and guards began funneling out to arrange the courtyard for the spectacle. Tyrion's guards led him off, presumably to strip his chains and allow him to watch from the sidelines. Oberyn departed with a swirl of his golden cloak, ignoring the stares. Jaime remained on the dais a moment, locking eyes with Cersei. She said nothing, but her expression was bitter enough to curdle milk. He almost dared to speak her name, but she pivoted in a swirl of black skirts and strode away toward the corridor that led to her rooms. Tywin too rose, sweeping from the throne room without a word. Jaime sighed and followed the throng, heading to the courtyard. The day was bright, a sky of pale blue overhead, the sun at its zenith. Guards established a wide circle in the courtyard, clearing the space of onlookers. A raised wooden platform at one end served as a vantage for high lords and ladies. Jaime ascended that platform, mindful that as King Regent, he must show himself. Tywin joined him shortly, flanked by Kevan. Mace Tyrell bustled into place, dabbing sweat from his brow. Below them, hundreds of lesser courtiers and small folk pressed in behind the guard lines, eager for a glimpse of the trial by combat. Sir Gregor Clegane arrived first, trudging into the courtyard like some monstrous statue brought to life. He wore heavy plate that caught the sunlight in a dull sheen, unornamented except for the crest of House Clegane on his broad chest. The man was huge, towering even over tall knights by half a head. His breath rasped through the slits of his greetham. He carried an immense two-handed sword as though it weighed no more than a twig. Oberyn appeared soon after, accompanied by Ellaria Sand, though she had to wait outside the circle. Oberyn was unhelmed, wearing only his light armor and brandishing a long spear with a wicked steel tip. Its shaft gleamed with some lacquered finish. As he strode forward, the watchers gasped quietly. The difference in size was glaring. Oberyn looked dwarfed by Gregor's bulk, but there was a lethal grace in the way Oberyn paced the circle, spinning the spear once to test his grip. Tyrion stood at the circle's edge, flanked by guards. Jaime could see the tension pulling at every line of his brother's face. He might have placed his life in the hands of a man known for cunning and skill, but also for bravado. Would that be enough to topple the mountain? When the crowd stilled, Tywin's voice rang out from the platform. "Let the gods decide. Champions, take your positions." Gregor hefted his sword in a single meaty hand, stepping to the center, each footstep causing the ground to shudder. Oberyn circled, eyes never leaving the mountain's visor. For a heartbeat, all went silent. Then with a roar, Gregor charged. But Oberyn spun aside, spear flashing. The tip glanced off Gregor's heavy pauldron with a scraping clang, drawing sparks but no blood. The mountain pivoted, surprisingly swift for a man his size, and swung that enormous blade. Oberyn ducked, letting the sword whistle overhead. He responded with a lunge, aiming for a gap in the armor near Gregor's thigh. But the mountain sidestepped, his steel boots slamming into the courtyard flags with a dull thud. The spear's tip skittered off the plate. Tension rippled through the onlookers. Oberyn had speed, but Gregor was a fortress in steel. If the spear couldn't find an opening, Oberyn's advantage meant little. Yet Oberyn pressed on, darting closer and retreating, testing. Each time the mountain slashed, Oberyn evaded by a hair's breadth, his boots nimble on the stones. Jaime found himself leaning forward, heart pounding. Was the prince's skill enough to outdo the brute force and thick steel? The small folk watched in a hush, many enthralled, some trembling. Round and round they went, the courtyard echoing with the clang of steel and the grunt of effort. Oberyn's spear occasionally sparked against the mountain's armor, searching for a vulnerable joint. Gregor hammered away with savage two-handed blows that rattled the air. One glancing strike tore a divot from the ground near Oberyn's foot, spraying shards of stone. Another word passed his ear. Each near miss drew gasps. From the platform, Jaime could see Tywin's knuckles whitening on the rail, though his face remained impassive. Mace Tyrell was chewing his lip. Kevan frowned, unblinking. Jaime glanced at the crowd where Cersei stood. She clutched the front of her gown, eyes wide with anticipation, perhaps longing to see Oberyn crushed. Ellaria Sand hovered at the opposite edge, fists clenched, calling encouragement in a voice lost amid the din. Tyrion stared with a mixture of terror and desperation. Suddenly, Oberyn found an opening. As Gregor brought his sword up for another overhead blow, the prince spun inside the arc, driving his spear at a gap beneath the mountain's raised arm. A shriek of metal and a wet thump followed. Gregor lurched back, letting out a roar that reverberated through the courtyard. Blood stained the side of his plate, a thin rivulet streaming from the joint. A cheer erupted among many watchers. Some for Oberyn, some just for the excitement. But the mountain was not felled. He swung wildly, forcing Oberyn to leap back, jerking his spear free as he did. The wound was real, but not instantly crippling. Oberyn kept his distance, spear held ready. Gregor bellowed curses, staggering for a moment before steadying himself. Then he charged again with even greater fury, blade arcing in savage sweeps. Oberyn retreated, fighting to keep out of reach. Jaime could see the flush of exertion on his face. Their skirmish was a dance of lethal skill. Oberyn rolling away, ducking, stabbing back with flicks of the spear, trying to reopen the wound. Gregor howled each time the tip found chinks in the armor, but still he pressed on, unstoppable. Oberyn was forced near the perimeter, almost colliding with a ring of guards, who quickly jumped aside. Sweat gleamed on Oberyn's brow. His breath came in ragged puffs. Gregor's armor was battered in places now, but the man's raw power had not diminished. One blow battered the spear aside, snapping a portion of its tip. Oberyn cursed, stumbling, and the crowd gasped as Gregor's sword rushed in. At the last instant, Oberyn twisted, letting the blade crash against a stone pillar, sending chips flying. He kicked out, catching Gregor in the knee. The mountain staggered once more, but refused to fall, smashing Oberyn with his forearm in retaliation. Oberyn tumbled across the flags, landing with a bone-jarring thud. A collective intake of breath swept the courtyard. Gregor wasted no time, looming over the prone prince, sword lifted for a final blow. But Oberyn still had his broken spear. He thrust upward in desperate defiance, slipping the jagged tip between two plates near Gregor's exposed armpit. A sickening crunch sounded. Gregor's roar turned into a guttural, choking sound. Blood sheeted, bright red down the steel. Gregor's arms spasmed. His sword clattered to the ground. Oberyn rolled away, panting, as the mountain swayed. For an instant, it seemed Gregor might swing again, but his knees hit the stones with a resounding crash. His Greathelm tilted back, revealing bloodshot eyes. Then he pitched forward, the spear lodged deep in his torso, his massive bulk slamming into the ground like a felled oak. Silence. It was as if the entire courtyard had lost the capacity for speech. Oberyn pulled himself up, battered and breathing heavily, holding his ribs. The mountain lay face down in a pool of blood, twitching in final spasms. Oberyn stared down, eyes filled with savage satisfaction. Then he raised his arms in triumph, ignoring the battered state of his weapon. A roar of conflicting exclamations rippled through the spectators. Some cheered Oberyn, others stood in stupefied shock. From the platform, Jaime saw Tyrion slump to his knees, relief flooding his face. The hush broke into shouts of amazement. Tywin stood, expression grim. By the laws of trial by combat, Tyrion was now proven innocent. There was no evading that verdict, not in the face of hundreds of witnesses. With deliberate slowness, Tywin banged his staff for silence, though the commotion took a moment to die down. Prince Oberyn Martell has emerged victorious, Tywin announced through clenched teeth. The gods have spoken. Tyrion Lannister is hereby found innocent of the charges of regicide. Tyrion exhaled in a half-strangled laugh, tears shining in the corners of his eyes. Oberyn wiped a streak of blood from his cheek, stepping clear of Gregor's corpse. Cersei, from across the courtyard, let out a cry of rage and stormed away, her black skirts tearing at the air. Tywin's gaze flicked to Jaime, a fury in his eyes he could barely contain. Jaime felt an odd mixture of relief and dread swirl in his gut. Tyrion was saved, and yet Tywin would not forget this affront anytime soon. Nor would Cersei. At the circle's edge, gold cloaks moved to free Tyrion from his manacles. The onlookers parted as Jaime descended the platform, striding to where his brother stood. Tyrion rubbed his raw wrists, staggering with the aftermath of terror and joy. "You did it," Tyrion murmured, half delirious. "I suppose Oberyn did it, but you made it possible, didn't you?" Jaime clasped Tyrion's shoulder. "He agreed to champion you. That's all that matters. You're free." Tyrion barked a laugh, sounding unhinged. "Free. and hated by half the city for making fools of them all. His gaze darted to the mountain's corpse. I can't believe he actually killed that monster. Ilaria Sand rushed forward, throwing herself at Oberyn, who caught her in a one-armed embrace, letting her clutch him. She pressed kisses to his cheek, relief evident. Oberyn, for his part, grimaced in pain from the blow had taken, but he wore a grin so fierce it seemed carved from stone. Jaime turned to face Tywin, who was stepping down from the platform. "Father," he said quietly, "the verdict is clear. Tyrion must be released immediately, and he's entitled to a seat at court as a Lannister and a lord." Aegon. Tywin's jaw tightened. He looked older in that moment, fury and frustration warring behind his cold eyes. "We will follow the law," he replied tightly. "Your brother is free, but do not presume you can school me in the duties of justice. I trust you are pleased with this day's outcome." "Your Grace." The last words were spat with barely veiled resentment, as though reminding Jaime that he wore the crown Tywin had orchestrated, and that Tywin expected fealty even from a king. Jaime inclined his head, ignoring the sting. "I am." For once, justice was served. Tywin's lips compressed to a thin line, but he said nothing further. Guards parted as the old lion swept back into the keep, Kevan trailing him. Mace Tyrell ambled away, muttering to Loras about the drama of the fight. Meanwhile, the courtyard erupted into a swirl of excitement. Some small folk tried to press closer for a view of the mountain's unmoving body. Others flocked around Oberyn, celebrating. A few wards and stewards hurried to bring stretchers, though none seemed eager to handle Gregor's massive corpse. Oberyn disengaged from Ilaria, stepping closer to Jaime and Tyrion. A subtle nod passed between him and Jaime, a promise that they would have words later about Tywin's confessions. For now, Oberyn pressed a hand against his ribcage, wincing. He landed a blow. "I think a cracked rib or two. But it's worth the pain," he said, voice brimming with dark satisfaction. Tyrion gave him a short bow. "I owe you my life, Prince Oberyn. I hope I live long enough to repay the favor." "Never one?" Oberyn studied him with curiosity. "Let us hope your father does not conjure new charges. Me? In any case, savor your freedom. I plan to savor my victory." He patted the jagged remains of his spear, then gestured for Ilaria to help him away. The crowd parted, watching with unsettled awe as he left the courtyard, the champion who had brought down the mountain. Jaime turned to Tyrion. "Come, let's get you cleaned up," he said, eyeing the ragged clothes and the shackles still dangling. "We can speak afterward about your plans." Tyrion's brow knit in confusion. Jaime went on, voice lower. "You cannot remain in King's Landing without incurring Cersei's wrath. Even Father's grudging acceptance might not protect you from another attempt on your life. And if you must know, I cannot keep an eye on you every minute." Tyrion gave a wan laugh. "I suspected as much. She'd probably send an assassin, or arrange a convenient accident if I walk the halls unguarded." He let his arms fall to his sides, exhaustion draining him. "What do you suggest?" Jaime shrugged. "We'll talk once you've eaten and rested. Let's find you a place to stay that's safe, for now at least. Maybe Kevan has a suitable set of rooms in the Tower of the Hand, or we can put you somewhere discreet. We'll need to see how Father responds." Tyrion nodded wearily, and they headed inside, weaving through the sea of gawking faces. Court officials murmured and parted to let them pass. Some looked relieved, others resentful. In the corridors, a hush followed them, a hush of confusion and subdued fear. Jaime could almost read their thoughts. The King Regent had gained a victory this day, but what would be the cost? They parted ways near the king's private chambers. Jaime directed 2 guards to accompany Tyrion to a vacant suite, once used by lesser members of the royal household. He promised to meet Tyrion there after a short while, ensuring the staff prepared a bath, food, and fresh garments. Tyrion, too drained to protest, merely nodded and trudged off under escort. Jaime lingered in the corridor, leaning against the wall with a long exhale. He closed his eyes, letting the swirl of events settle in his mind. Tyrion was free. Oberyn had struck a blow at the mountain, and symbolically, at Tywin's hold on the city's fear. The realm would talk about this for weeks. But an undercurrent of dread tugged at Jaime's thoughts. Cersei would be enraged, plotting some new vengeance. Tywin would be quietly furious and might attempt to retaliate politically. And Oberyn would expect Jaime's assistance in prying out the truth of Elias' death, or perhaps exacting a measure of justice from Tywin. That might prove more perilous than facing the mountain in single combat. At length, he pushed off the wall and started toward the royal apartments. If he was truly King Regent, if that title meant anything more than a prop for Tywin's ambition, he had to take firm action. The next days would define whether Jaime could stand as a real authority or remain overshadowed by his father. He found Cersei in her chambers, the door guarded by two stern-faced men who let Jaime pass only after exchanging uncertain glances. She was pacing near the window, a goblet of wine in hand, her posture rigid. She whirled when she saw him, eyes bright with fury. "So it's done," she said, voice low but trembling with rancor. "You found a way to undermine me. Gregor is dead, and now Tyrion is free. How very clever of you, Jaime." He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "It was Tyrion's right to demand a trial by combat," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I didn't contrive the law, Cersei. If the gods favored him, it means he wasn't guilty." She snorted. "Spare me the talk of gods. This was politics and cunning, nothing more. That viper from Dorne wanted the mountain. You fed him the opportunity on a silver plate." She stalked closer, the sour smell of wine thick on her breath. "My son's murderer now walks free because of your meddling." Jaime stiffened. "Our son," he corrected. "And you know Tyrion wouldn't kill his own nephew, no matter how Joffrey treated him. Think. The moment you found Joffrey choking, did you really believe Tyrion had planned that?" He was just as shocked. Cersei's lips curled. He hated Joffrey. Everyone knew it. He humiliated him at the feast. But apparently, none of that matters. You wear the crown and can do as you please. No. Jaime stood his ground. "I told you, if Tyrion was truly guilty, he'd have lost. The mountain was unstoppable. Or so everyone thought." Oberyn prevailed. "That is the way of things. I'm sorry you feel robbed of vengeance, but I can't change the outcome." Her free hand lashed out, knocking a vase from a small table. It shattered on the floor, water spilling over the rushes. The guard outside the door might have flinched at the crash, but no one dared intrude. Cersei's chest heaved. "I lost Joffrey. Now you take from me the justice he deserved. And you call yourself my brother, my lover?" Her eyes glistened with tears of rage. "I want no part of you." Jaime's face twisted with regret. "I never asked to be king. You know that. But if I have any power to do right, I must use it. Let Tyrion live and find the real murderer." She let out a scornful laugh, turning away to stare out the window at the courtyard far below. The hush stretched. Jaime stepped closer, tentatively reaching for her shoulder, but she shrugged him off, refusing his touch. Her anger radiated like a furnace. Finally, she spoke, calmer but no less cold. "Leave. I have no desire to share your bed or your counsel tonight. Go savor your precious victory, your beloved dwarf's victory. I am done with you." Bemseder. Jaime felt a vice around his heart. He opened his mouth to speak, but her silhouette was as rigid as steel, the lines of her back forbidding. He let out a slow breath. "As you wish," he murmured, then turned and departed, footsteps echoing across broken shards. He walked away, numbed. Perhaps any illusions that he and Cersei could mend the rift between them had been foolish. She was consumed by grief, and now he had taken her scapegoat from her. In her eyes, that was betrayal. He emerged into the corridor, feeling the burden of the crown weigh heavier than ever. He made his way to the suite where Tyrion was recovering. 2 gold cloaks stood outside. They bowed to Jaime, letting him in. Within, Tyrion was seated on a cushioned chair by the hearth, hands wrapped around a goblet of his own. He wore fresh clothing that looked slightly baggy, but at least it was clean. A bandage covered a scrape at his temple. Near him stood a platter of cheese and bread, half consumed. Tyrion looked up as Jaime entered, a wan grin forming. "Brother, Or should I call you your grace? He raised his goblet in a mocking salute. I owe you 1,000 thanks. And a baron too, but he's nowhere to be found. Some say he left to nurse his wounds, or perhaps to find a more robust celebration. Jaime gave a tired shrug, sinking into the chair opposite him. Oberyn does as he pleases. He's satisfied for now, but I'm sure he'll want more from me soon. Some arrangement about father's accountability for the sack of King's Landing all those years ago? Tyrion's brows rose. That's a dangerous game. But after what I witnessed, I'd not want to cross the Red Viper. All right. I'll be brief, since you look as though you might fall over. What do I do next? Shall I simply remain in the keep, waiting for Cersei's assassins to poison my wine? Men. Jaime tugged at the edge of his sleeve, considering. You're free under the law, so no one can challenge that outright. But Cersei's wrath is no small thing. If you stay here, you'll be in constant danger. And father, well, I doubt he'll openly try to kill you, but he might contrive some new puzzle to rid himself of your presence. Tyrion sighed, taking a gulp of wine. So you suggest I leave King's Landing? Jaime nodded slowly. At least until the dust settles. There are safer places, Casterly Rock for one. Though father might not welcome you with open arms. Still, the official seat of House Lannister is your rightful heritage as much as mine. Or you could sail to Essos if you prefer. But that's a harsher life. Tyrion tugged at the bandage on his temple, wincing. The Rock. Ironically, I've always wanted to see it, but father sent me elsewhere whenever I asked. Perhaps this time I'll simply go. With your blessing, as king, I'd have at least the legal right to reside in our family seat. Might that keep me safe from father's immediate scheming? Jaime considered it. It might, though in truth, father wields great influence there too. But the distance from Cersei might help. She'll be less likely to hire assassins if you're not under her nose. If you do decide to go, go soon. The roads might still be passable before news spreads too widely that you're traveling. If we wait too long, there'll be no end of brigands wanting to capture you for ransom or worse. Tyrion tapped a finger on the goblet's rim. A fair point. I'm tired of living in a city that hates me. Perhaps the Rock will treat me no better, but at least it's new scenery. I do worry about Podrick though, and Shay. He broke off, wincing. No, never mind that. Shay's betrayal still stings, but I suppose she made her choice. He sipped wine, forcibly calming himself. Pod might come with me, if he's still around. Jaime recalled that Podrick Payne had once been Tyrion's squire. I'll see if I can find him. Likely the poor boy is holed up somewhere, frightened half to death by these events. If he wishes to travel with you, I'll not stand in his way. They fell into a pensive silence. The room's hearth crackled softly. Jaime realized how exhausted he felt. His mind and body weighed down by the day's tension, by the confrontation with Cersei, by the complicated promise he'd made to Oberyn. But at least Tyrion lived, free to dream of a future away from King's Landing. After a moment, Tyrion asked quietly, "Where does this leave you, brother, as King Regent? Are you truly in power, or does father still pull the strings? I saw his face today. He looked ready to devour you with a glance." Jaime stared into the hearth. He's furious, but I hold the throne. The city sees me as king, at least in name. The small council remains mostly loyal to him. But if I can prove I'm no puppet, maybe I can rule in truth. The question is how to manage it without plunging the realm into further chaos. Betasor. Tyrion pursed his lips in thought. If I might give a morsel of advice, keep the Tyrells close. They're still essential for supplies, for gold, for alliances, and watch out for Varys, has a spider spinning webs in every corner. You never know when he might slip a subtle knife under your ribs. Also, don't let your father get you alone in a locked room. A faint grimace curled his mouth. He might decide it's time for another king to drop dead unexpectedly. Crown or no crown? Jaime gave a wry nod. Sound counsel. We've had enough regicide in these walls to last a lifetime. They lapsed into silence again. Eventually, Jaime rose, crossing to the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll arrange your departure if that's what you decide. Unless you have some reason to linger here, but I strongly recommend against it. Tyrion waved a hand in weary agreement. I'll be gone before Cersei finishes her next goblet of wine. Jaime left quietly. In the corridor, the tension in his shoulders refused to ease. He made his way toward the council chambers, thinking to gather any new developments. But a passing steward bowed low and said, "Your Grace, Lord Tywin has convened a meeting of certain counselors in the Solar. He asked for your presence." Jaime nodded, throat drying. Of course Tywin would waste no time reasserting control. Now, after the trial's outcome, no doubt he wished to salvage what influence he could. Jaime straightened his cloak and strode on, mindful that each step took him closer to what might be a confrontation with the father who once shaped him as a chess piece. He reached the Solar and found it well lit by lamps, a polished table at its center. Tywin stood at the far end, arms folded over his chest. Cersei was notably absent, though Kevan was present, and Mace Tyrell hovered near the sideboard as if uncertain whether to approach. Pycelle hunched on a stool, muttering to himself, while Varys waited in a corner, face politely bland. The moment Jaime entered, Tywin motioned for the others to depart. Kevan, Mace, Pycelle, and Varys filed out, each offering Jaime a respectful bow. Only father and son remained. Tywin exhaled, his gaze piercing. Close the door. Jaime shut it, stepping forward. Tywin let the silence linger a moment, eyes narrowing. "Well, Your Grace, you've proven yourself quite capable of defying me. How does it feel to undermine your father in front of the entire court?" Jaime braced himself. "I didn't undermine you. I upheld Tyrion's right to a fair trial. That was the law. You taught me the importance of law once." Tywin's jaw set. "Don't twist my lessons. You manipulated Oberyn Martell to slay the Mountain. You humiliated me, and your sister, after we built the trial to ensure a swift condemnation. Now, the city sees us as divided. Do you think that bodes well for House Lannister's longevity?" "No, Teresa." Jaime refused to lower his gaze. "The city sees that justice was done. Perhaps that will breed more loyalty than fear." Tywin's lip curled. "Fear is more reliable. Your notion of justice is an idealistic child's dream." Jaime's anger sparked. He had worn enough shame for a lifetime, been called Oathbreaker, Kingslayer, all for doing what he thought was right when the realm's safety hung by a thread. Now Tywin belittled him again. He set his hand on the hilt of his sword. Pure reflex, though he did not draw. "I am no child. I am King Regent, and if you try to force me into another farce of a trial, or if you attempt to harm Tyrion, I'll..." Tywin arched an eyebrow. "You'll what? Have me imprisoned? Banished? I am Tywin Lannister. Your rule rests upon my foundation. You remain king only so long as I allow it. The moment I withdraw my support, half the realm will tear you apart. Or have you forgotten that your ascension was never truly sanctioned by tradition? Tommen is the rightful heir in many eyes." "Nah." Jaime felt fury coil in his gut. "So that's your threat? You'll turn the lords against me, push Tommen forward. Perhaps you'd find a way to kill me as well. That's what you did with Joffrey, isn't it? You used him until..." Tywin slapped the table. "Enough. I did not kill my own grandson, no matter what paranoid fantasies fill your head. But I will not stand by while you unravel the order I've built. You saved Tyrion's life today. Fine, Darati. I will not contradict the gods' verdict. But if you continue to take steps that weaken House Lannister, I will remove you from that throne and place Tommen on it, with or without your blessings." Jaime breathed hard, considering. If Tywin launched an open schism in House Lannister, the realm would see chaos. The Tyrells might seize advantage, or the Martells might sense weakness. The Iron Bank might cease to show any forbearance. War could erupt anew. The last thing Jaime wanted was another war. He forced himself to step back from the precipice of that argument, though anger still burned. "It doesn't have to come to that," he said in a lower tone. "I'm not trying to tear our house apart, but I will not allow an innocent brother to be killed, and I won't be your puppet. If we stand together, let it be on terms that do not stain our family's honor further." Tywin let out a harsh breath, some of his anger simmering down to cold calculation. "And what do you propose then? That we pretend we are in agreement, that we simply move on from today's fiasco as if nothing has changed?" Jaime spread his hands. "We tell the realm that Tyrion's trial ended lawfully. We reaffirm the alliance with Highgarden and maintain the crown's stability. We watch the city for any further conspiracies related to Joffrey's murder. In the meantime, Tommen remains safely out of the line of political crossfire. He's still a boy. Let me hold the throne for a few years, see if I can restore stability. If I fail, you'll do what you will anyway." Mizendel. Tywin studied him in silence. His posture softened slightly, though his eyes remained hard. At length, he spoke. "Very well. For now, I will not challenge your regency. But hear this, Jaime. If you cross me again, if you take another action so blatantly defiant that it weakens our house, I will not hesitate to replace you. Do we have an understanding?" Nemasmala. Jaime nodded once. "We do." Tywin's jaw worked. He gave a curt nod in return, then turned away, dismissing Jaime without a further word. Jaime left the solar, exhaling in relief. Their truce was uneasy at best, but it was something. The threat still loomed. Tywin would pounce at the first sign of vulnerability. By the time Jaime returned to his chambers, darkness had settled outside. Servants scurried about, lighting candles. He waved them off, craving solitude. The day had been a tempest, leaving his mind and body exhausted. He drew a hand over his face, feeling the rasp of stubble. Had it truly been only hours since the trial? It felt like a lifetime. Yet a glimmer of pride flickered in his chest. Tyrion lived. Justice for once had won out in King's Landing. And that triumph belonged as much to Oberyn Martell as to Jaime's precarious negotiations. Oberyn would collect his price in due time, pushing for a confession or retribution from Tywin. Jaime could not foresee how that might unravel, but for now, he clung to the knowledge that at least one innocent man had escaped the jaws of the lion. He sank onto a window seat, gazing at the black sky peppered with stars. The city below glowed with torches, a restless population unsettled by the day's events. The throne was his, for now, though it felt more like a noose. He let out a slow breath, recalling the clang of Oberyn's spear and the final roar of the mountain. Perhaps, in some small measure, it proved that even the monstrous can fall when faced with enough courage and cunning. Tomorrow, he would meet with Tyrion again, arrange his quiet departure for Casterly Rock. He would also have to speak to Oberyn, ensuring the prince's demands were not neglected. One step at a time, he told himself. Perhaps he could forge a new kind of rule, one that gave the realm a chance for genuine peace. But as he listened to the wind rattle the shutters, a shiver coursed through him. The Red Keep was a crucible of secrets. Joffrey's murderer was still unknown. Cersei's rage would burn hotter every day. Tywin's ambitions never slept. The Tyrells pressed for advantage, the Martells demanded vengeance. And across the seas, rumors stirred of dragons reborn. Jaime closed his eyes. For now, King's Landing stood on a knife's edge. He could only pray that his next choices would not spill them into fresh chaos. Eventually, a faint hint of sleep tugged at him. So he rose, slipped off his outer garments, and settled onto the bed. The crown rested on a nearby table, a silent sentinel in the candlelight. He stared at the golden circlet for a long moment, pondering the cost of wearing it. Then he blew out the candles, letting darkness swallow the glimmer of gold. In that darkness he lay awake, mind churning. Despite the victory of the day, he could not rid himself of the sense that every triumph carried within it the seed of another conflict. So be it. He was Jaime Lannister, a man who had once murdered a king in the name of the realm's salvation. Now he bore the title of King Regent, hoping to serve that same realm in a different way. The path stretched before him, long, fraught, and uncertain. But at least, for this night, Tyrion's life had been spared. A spark of hope lingered in the gloom. Jaime let himself cling to that spark, if only to endure the burden of tomorrow. The hours dripped by, measured in the slow beat of his heart. Sleep finally came, blanketing the turmoil. In his dreams, he saw 1,000 swords forging into a throne that glimmered with phantom fire. His phantom right hand curled around the hilt of a sword that bled gold. When morning came, it would be real steel he would need. Real cunning, real resolve. For the War of Shadows in King's Landing had only begun.